Okay, I will call to order the Monday, October 14th, 2019 meeting of the Oregon City Planning Commission. First item on the agenda is public comments on items not on our agenda this evening. Anyone wishing to make a comment not on the agenda? No. Okay. Then we'll move on to the next item, which is the first public hearing. Item 3A, it's a request for continuance on a site plan design review and parking adjustment at the Milner Veterinary Clinic parking lot. Is anyone here wishing to comment on that? Okay, so since there's no comment, we're going to forego reading the big statement. I will open the public hearing, and then we just need a motion to continue to October 28th.
So moved.
Wait, let me open the public hearing.
Sorry.
Okay, so we open the public hearing on item GLUA-19-00017. And is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Can you state, sorry.
Certainly. All right. Yeah, I make a motion that we request for continuance on GLUA 19-00017 to the 28th of October.
Seconded.
Yeah.
Moved and seconded? Go ahead and vote.
Commissioner Johnson?
Aye.
Commissioner Stoll?
Aye.
Commissioner Gage?
Aye.
Commissioner, let's see if we can do this, Schlagenhofer?
Aye.
Commissioner Guile?
It's Commissioner Dirk. Yes.
Motion carries. Chair.
Aye.
Chair. Motion carries.
He doesn't count it.
Okay, thank you. All right, moving on to item 3B, planning file GLUA 19-00002, updates to the Oregon City Stormwater and Grading Design Standards and Stormwater Master Plan.
Thank you, Chair Mitchell. Let's see, there we go. So this is another legislative process this evening. We seem to have a fair amount of them this year. So the legislative review, there's a planning commission review, and then the planning commission will forward the recommendation to the city commission, who will provide the final adoption. The project scope is to look at the proposed revisions to our existing stormwater grading design standards and amendments to the stormwater master plan. So you are not expected to be stormwater engineers. So if you came this evening worried about that, don't worry. It's really limited scope in these two items. Normally the Planning Commission doesn't see changes to specific engineering policies or capital improvement plans, but in this situation, the stormwater design standards and the stormwater master plan do have a role to play in land use approvals. That's why you have that nexus. And your really goal tonight is to determine if through the items in the record, both the Planning Commission staff report and the applicant's submittal and any presentations and the two draft documents, that the Planning Commission can find adequate findings that the city's approach for water quality and stormwater facilities are adequate, to show adequate facilities and to show addressing that we're not worsening our natural resources by these specific design guidelines. And I think what the applicant will hear tonight is we're moving in a positive place. We're providing additional protections than what exists today. So as I mentioned, the three questions that you need to be thinking tonight is, can the Planning Commission affirm that their master plan and stormwater design standards, guidelines, meet the goals and policies of the comprehensive plan, which you see a cover, and our state land use goals? And two, can you affirm that the proposed amendments of the master plan and guidelines address the adequacy of city infrastructure and facilities? And finally, can you ensure that the amendments don't compromise the city's protection of natural resource areas? So this is kind of the higher level, and those are kind of the questions of, do I have enough information to make those adequacy findings? We have this evening the applicant's consultant and the applicant, our Public Works Department for the City of Oregon City, here to answer any of your specific questions. But process-wise, it's, can you move forward with those findings and then make a recommendation to the City Commission, either this evening or at a future meeting?
Okay.
That's all I have. So I can, let's see. So I'm going to bring up the applicant's proposal. 1 second. This is where we had the technical difficulties, so just one moment.
Is the applicant a consultant or employee?
The applicant is the city.
The city, okay.
This is on, yeah? Okay. So hi, my name's Alyssa Maxwell. I'm with Brown and Caldwell. We are the city's consultant in developing the Stormwater Master Plan. And we were with this group, I believe, last spring to talk about the work on the plan. And so this is to update you, show you where we ended up with some of the projects and costs, and then to answer any questions related to the application that Christina just explained. So, like we said, we're having a little bit of technical difficulties. We're going to scroll through, I think. Here we go. Will it go? Okay, we'll just do it this way. Okay, so briefly, when we're talking about stormwater for Oregon City, we're talking about primarily protection of natural resources. We have a list there of all the different natural systems that you have in your community, and there are a number of wonderful natural spaces that are protected through both land use policy and then cities' stormwater standards and other development requirements. The stormwater system itself that the city, on a public works standpoint, manages is the conveyance infrastructure and the stormwater management facilities. So we're talking about over 120 miles of piped drainage systems. The stormwater system is a gravity flow system, so all the water drains out of those pipes into one of the natural systems. There's no pumping or treatment plant for stormwater. Instead, water quality is protected through smaller facilities like you might see a swale or a drainage ditch or a pond, and those are all they're in place to protect and remove pollutants from the stormwater before they end up in your natural systems.
Before you move forward, where is there one in Park Place? I've lived there 18 years and didn't know there was, other than Abernathy Creek, where is there a creek in Park Place?
So there is a historic creek that goes through there. It's largely piped and culverted. So I think all those small culverts that you see on different corners and along the roadways through Park Place are parts of the old drainage system. But that natural system was moved into those drainage ditches and culverts in order to develop.
So it's not a creek or anything like I know about Abernathy. You know?
Right, exactly. It'd be much smaller drainage.
Thank you.
Yeah. Let's see. So from a planning context standpoint, the Stormwater Master Plan, there's two regulatory kind of major requirements of why the city is developing this master plan. So the first is that it is required as part of your comprehensive plan to have a master plan for utilities, including stormwater. And then it is a required commitment that comes from the city's NPDES MS4 permit through DEQ. So that's the permit that allows the city to discharge stormwater into those natural systems. And one of the requirements of that permit is that you have an updated master plan in place. So city staff have been working on this plan. We've been working with them for several years to get to this point to have an updated master plan. The plan itself will be used to identifies capital project priorities. It identifies what those budget needs and some growth impacts are, and then aligns some of the operations and maintenance activities, and eventually the plan itself and the projects will be used to come up with a funding strategy. So the master plan doesn't lay out at this point how to fund all the projects. It's really identifying what the needs are. And then to give you just a little bit of background, the city's last stormwater master plan was called the Drainage Master Plan that was adopted in 1988. So it's definitely, we're due for an update. There has been some smaller scale master planning for specific basins or specific development areas in the late 90s. Some of those there's the South End Master Plan and another one that I'm not remembering. But this update has been going on for a couple years. We've been doing extensive problem area identification, field research, modeling and analysis to come up with the proposed plan. That plan talks about capacity needs, so whether the pipes are large enough to move the water and make sure that you're not flooding roads and private property. It talks about water quality, where you may need to add enhancements to improve downstream systems. And then it also does look at what you can do on the public infrastructure side to protect those natural systems. It talks about maintenance and replacement of infrastructure. You have some stormwater infrastructure that is getting quite old, right? In some of the old town areas of the city, we've got 100-year
5-year-old pipes, and those are going to need to be replaced. And we want to do that, want to be proactive in doing that and not wait for them to fail. And ultimately, there's a prioritized list of capital projects that probably a 10 to 15-year time frame for getting those completed. So some of the recommendations, touched on a few of these, namely a major recommendation is to replace deteriorating and failing infrastructure. In order to do that, there needs to be a way to evaluate your existing infrastructure in the city. In the time we've been working on this project, the Public Works Department has implemented a pretty extensive CCTV program to go in and video existing pipes and find out where the potential problems are. So that's jumping you a step ahead as a community. Our recommendations to upsize some existing pipes to reduce flooding, install some new stormwater infrastructure in areas that don't currently have a drainage system. We have a couple projects like that, like around Harding Boulevard is an area that doesn't have a dedicated stormwater system, and that water is going into the sewer. We'd like to get those separated. Doing some work to monitor and stabilize outfalls in Newell Canyon, which is a continuing problem. Increasing water quality treatment through some very specific projects. There's a lot of areas of the city that have good water quality treatment, particularly in the south end where newer developments have come in. Those developments have been putting in ponds and other facilities over, for the last, probably 20 years or so. And so those areas really have good treatment. It's some of the other areas that need better water quality treatment. And then I mentioned continuing to implement those programs to monitor the condition of pipes and plan for that replacement. So this is the priority list of projects that are in the master plan. These are, as you can see, kind of just the scattering there. They do cover all areas of the city. The specific timing and scheduling of these projects is going to come through a later process. That'll be part of a funding plan and analysis that's done independent of the master plan. The application that you have with the draft master plan has detailed information for all these projects, cost estimates, the reasons, the various needs that they address. But we do have a couple examples. I think you saw some of these when we were here in the spring. So probably the largest capacity-based project we're recommending is through the John Adams Basin. This project has areas where you have both pipes that are too small and then they're old and deteriorating and need to get replaced. And so again, trying to do that proactively rather than waiting for a failure, but getting a funding plan in place to get this work done. And then meeting some multiple objectives. So again, reducing neighborhood flooding, replacing deteriorated pipes, and then there's areas where the existing pipes are not in the right of way, so they're non-conforming, they're under people's private property, so getting those moved into public right of way.
That was going to be my question. I'm not sure how deep these actually are,
Right.
But it's going to be disturbing some traffic, but also goes through some older homes up there in that area.
Right. So the project, this would not be a minor project. This would be a major undertaking. And so, yes, we would not be recommending that pipes that are under homes be replaced. Those would be plugged and left where they are, and the infrastructure would be routed into the right-of-way instead.
So on these ones in this heavily dense area, I know they don't have the holding ponds we have in the Park Place South End. Does that water, where does it go? Flow into the river after you feel that it's been... We don't clean it like log or anything like that.
Correct. In this area, there is not treatment for that.
It just flows right down to the Willamette.
Correct.
So nothing to cleanse it or clean it from all the
Not currently, and because of the tight right-of-way, there's not a lot of opportunity to do some water quality treatment through here. There are other areas of the city where you might look at doing like putting in the green streets, which would be like those, you have a curb bump out that might have a treatment area in them. Those are really best, those types of facilities are really best in areas where the soils infiltrate really well, and this area does not. So this would be a project that would be focused more on capacity and not on treatment.
So my question leads to, we all know what's happened several times with floods. Every time we get a heavy rain here, the Willamette River comes up to the top of the falls.
Yeah.
Oh, do these pipes pipes empty into the Willamette so that when the Willamette floods, it backflows into those areas?
They shouldn't. There's a, pipe, if you look on this map, the pipe that's in purple is the one that's kind of down below the bluff, and that's the one that might be impacted with water from,
What street is that on?
I don't know. off
It's
the
like
top of my head.
12.
So, yeah.
Probably 12.
Because I always
Yeah.
wondered if with that flood, I mean, the water goes everywhere. It's going to come right back up those pipes. And if
Right.
you're trying to get it out of the streets up in this older neighborhood,
Right, and so up here, though, you have a significant elevation drop to get down
That's
to
what I was
there.
thinking,
So the water wouldn't back up from the river through there.
but you
This-
have heavy rain up above, meeting the heavy rain.
That is, and so there's a detailed computer model
Is
that
there?
looks at that. That's what we use to come up with these revised pipe sizes. So all the pipes through here would be most of them, I think, also not only get moved, but they also get upsized and become larger.
That was what I was
Those
wondering, if the
flows.
pipes that emptied from that area were above river level, or are they below?
They're
river?
above. Yep, everything except what's that purple at the very top end.
Okay,
Yeah.
Where's that purple one come out?
that's what I was,
Is there out of the
Okay.
bank?
Well,
Comes
it's
out of the
between
bank or
John Storm
underwater?
and Clackamat.
But is it underwater or is it?
Yeah, it would end up under, I mean, I think that the outfall itself should be close to the water's edge or underwater. I don't know specifically. There are quite a few outfalls. This is just one of the many outfalls that go to the Willamette River. So there's quite a few of them
And
along
can
the
that be
banks.
bored or expanded, or did it have to rip up 99 to replace that?
Yeah, so the specific the specific construction method on this one would, these are just preliminary concepts, and so figuring out which construction method, that would be part of the design work that goes into these projects.
Okay, I don't know if you can directionally bore something that
Right.
big.
What a
Yeah, we'd have to
That's a
look at
54
the,
inch bit. That's a.
Yeah.
that's
It's
a big bit.
54 now, right?
I don't know.
That's
It's-
just
The 54 is the proposed, but
Yeah, but if you go look at it, it's giant.
yeah, it's big, right.
well, that's more than 4 feet, 5 feet.
It'd be hard to drill a hole.
I would off the top of my head, I'd say it's more like 6 or 7 feet.
Yeah, 54 inches
It's-
short of.
It's huge.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry.
It's fine. So yeah, so at this point, these are preliminary, and so getting projects into the master plan, that gets you to be able to take the next steps, to figure out how do we fund the design work, how do we fund the more analysis that's needed, what's a good, what is the timeline, how many years do we need to save up our money before we can, implement a project like this. So these are just, at this point, planning level.
Are those
And
planning?
without- oops,
Sorry.
Go ahead, Tom.
I was going to say, are these planning levels and the projected cost on the city, the state, the county doesn't do any of that? It's all city come out of our taxes? Is that the idea?
So the funding plan would look at that. So the funding, the city is planning to do a financial study as a follow-on to this master plan. That would be a different consultant that would do that work, similar to all the other utility works, and that would look at revisions to things like utility rates. You have a stormwater utility rate that everybody pays, as well as your system development charges that get charged to development. So a project like this is hard to tie to specific new development, but there are projects in the plan that are more tied to future development areas that you may be able to fund at least partially through SDCs.
Just looks like all that boring's going to be expensive.
It's going to be
Sorry,
expensive.
Mike.
Yeah, no,
Go ahead.
this is not an inexpensive project.
And without, as you said, without treatment possibilities in that area, we still stay in alignment with any state or federal regulations that we have to abide with?
Correct. So the requirements to add treatment are when you have new or redevelopment of property. And so there are areas within that basin that if they were to come up for redevelopment, those residential areas are not good examples necessarily, but some of your smaller commercial areas, when they're getting redeveloped, then those projects add treatment on site.
Okay.
Yeah.
But only new development? Okay, thank you.
Let's see, so then here's another example I mentioned earlier. So Harding, this is a neighborhood. What you see in green is where they're really hard to see, but that's the sewer pipe. There's the stormwater pipes are the ones that are in blue, and then the red would be a new proposed stormwater pipe for this neighborhood that doesn't have one. So there's this project and the project at Rivercrest that both need to get connected to
So
the
there's
stormwater
currently
system.
no stormwater drainage
Correct.
in that area? None?
Correct.
Where does water go?
Into the sewer system, drains into the sewer manholes. So that helps both utilities by getting these separated. And then I'm not going through all the projects. We just picked a few example projects. This is project up on Holcomb. As you know, there's lots of new development up there, and that adds water to the system. Those new developments are adding stormwater facilities on site. It doesn't always address prior, what the existing drainage is, but this is a project that to upsize these pipes and move from ditched infrastructure to piped infrastructure, there may be a reason to connect that through SDCs or to tie those projects to new development, but you can't do that until you have it in a master plan. So as these projects come up for development applications, if there's not a proposed project in your master plan, it's hard to look at that development project and say, add a condition of approval for them to do some public infrastructure improvements.
I see a couple creeks there, Tour Creek. I didn't see it on your list of other, when you mentioned.
Yeah, so that Tour Creek is one that falls into the list of other
Never
small
seen it before.
tributaries.
What's the other one? I've never seen those
I don't know,
before.
that's an unnamed that goes down to Livesey.
Cuts right through the Park Place concept plan area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is that going to be protected, I wonder, when they do this, these creeks being built
They
on?
would be, yes. You have setback requirements on natural systems.
Yeah. I always think of those things when I see them.
Yes, we do. This is the list of priority projects, and we're not going to dig through those today. The details, again, were in the plan itself. And as I mentioned before, it's a large price tag. But it's a long-term plan. And so having your last master plan from 1988, there's no projects that are being pulled off of that last master plan right now. And so this plan is needed so that you have some direction for stormwater and surface water related capital projects. There's a number of programs down below that we also they get wrapped into the budget of estimate and things as well. I did want to address a question that this group brought to us the last time we were here, which was about future planning areas and how those are incorporated into the master plan. So this is like the Park Place concept and things like that. So while the master plan itself is focused primarily on capital projects, the way that stormwater systems get designed and built in those new concept planning areas is through the stormwater design standards requirements. So if you look at this, whether you have a concept plan, whether you have a redevelopment area, whether you have a private development or a city public project, all of those types of projects are required to follow through the stormwater design standards that are also as part of this application, an update there. And those are the standards that then protect the natural resources. So it's through the stormwater design standards that you mandate that projects put in those treatment systems, put in flow controls to reduce the speed of flow, to reduce erosion, put in outfall protections. All those sorts of things are in the stormwater design standards that the city has had stormwater standards in place for quite a long time. There was a major update, we'll cover that major update in 2015, and then tonight we're looking at some minor adjustments and clarifications to those standards. So just real briefly, the other additional recommendations that are in the master plan, I think we've mentioned continuing the stormwater video inspection. City's doing that for both sanitary and stormwater. There's a lot of data that's being collected, but that will help plan for where replacements need to happen. Those two go together. We're recommending that there be a systematic outfall inspection program implemented around Newell Canyon in particular, so that on a regular basis, all of those different stormwater outfalls are inspected and looked, check for erosion, identify what replacements might be needed, look for enhancements. So that would help protect from more erosion through the canyon area. And then we've mentioned the funding strategy that's coming as a follow-on to this plan. And then the master plan recommends continuing to implement stormwater design standards so that new projects and new developed areas are not then immediately on a list for a need for a stormwater capital project. You're getting the systems built with the development.
Can you explain for those who do watch on TV what you mean by initiate outfall inspection for Newell Canyon? We all know about the slides.
Right.
Is there a particular creek that falls so that you can explain what you mean by initiate outfall?
Oh yeah, so outfall inspections. We're recommending there are dozens of small stormwater pipes that outfall toward Newell Canyon, somewhere along the hillside, in all different areas. Some of them are very hidden within, vegetation, or they're well downstream. And so this study would be a project that city would do to go out and systematically inspect each of those outfalls, look for erosion problems, look for areas where the rock riprap has been maybe washed away, and then come up with a plan to replace those so that you don't initiate more slides.
Because there was one at Beaver Creek, Malala, when we looked at expanding
Yeah.
that intersection. But
Yep.
are you saying that most of those neighborhoods that are up there currently have their drainage into Newell Creek, and there's nothing that, with no pipes that lead it down to a lower, or it just goes onto the soil up above in Newell Creek?
At various levels. So that's some of those outfalls. I've been to a number of them. Some of those outfalls drain into a smaller creek, a very small drainage. Some of them do just outfall out onto the hillside. And so this would be a study or a program, I think is a better term for that, so that on a regular basis, so maybe it's every 5 years, every year you're going out and inspecting a certain number of them, and then you're coming back around and inspecting them again to look for problems and changes, and so you can correct them before they become a
So
big
currently,
issue.
knowing that we've had slides there, you don't see anything major that needs to be addressed first before all the neighborhoods? Or have you got a priority listing of what needs to be looked at first?
We did, yes. So the city, as part of the master plan and previous to the master plan work, did what's called the hydro modification study, where we had field inspections of outfalls where there was concern for slides or potential erosion, and so those have been cataloged, and then those have been added to a routine inspection list, so the city is getting out and looking on an annual basis to see if things are changing, but it's for just a limited number of them right now, so the master plan is recommending that program be
I
expanded
see.
to cover all the
Good.
outfalls.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Question.
Yeah.
The outfalls in Newell Ridge Canyon,
Newell Creek.
are those, Newell Creek, are those public or are they private? Do people have a stormwater system up there, or do they have to run their gutters down the hill?
They are generally public because they're coming off of the public right-of-way, so it's usually where the streets have ended, and then those outfalls are coming off the street, so it is public.
So the houses drain to the street, but then the street drains into the canyon?
Mostly, yeah. I mean, that's a good description, yeah.
Okay, I was just wondering if, because I know they had a lot of slides there where some people just running the drains down the hill behind their house. Was that part of the problem, or?
I don't think it's usually it's usually a collection system that then, it's not usually the runoff from one house that's gonna cause a slide. It's where we've taken a group of houses, a new street, and all that water gets funneled into a pipe, and now you have that concentrated flow down into the
It's like the rain
hillside.
we're going to have this weekend.
Right.
So this is one last slide to cover the updates to the stormwater design standards. So again, there was a major overhaul of the stormwater design standards in 2015. So these are the guidelines for any new development, any redevelopment. City projects also follow these, so public, private, doesn't matter. Everybody's following the same set of standards. 2015 was the major update. I believe I sat here and talked to the Planning Commission at that point about these as well. So the update tonight, or throughout this year, is really a clarification update. The standards have been in place for a number of years. City staff, as well as developers and applicants, are able to say, here's the areas that are confusing, here's the stuff that it's not aligning up, here's where we're often having to seek an adjustment. So trying to get all those areas clarified. One is clarifying the hierarchy for the types of stormwater facilities that are being used in the city, trying to align the conveyance system standards with ODOT, so that's getting better regional consistency, and then a number of updates in terminology, acronyms, references, to just keep it consistent with other parts of city code. There's no substantial technical revision to the standards in this update. But I know Josh is here. If you guys have additional questions, we can.
What kind of alignments do you have to do with ODOT? Is that along the 213 state highways, or is
It's
it
not
something more than that?
It's not so much that. It's more, so ODOT has a hydraulics manual that really dictates how pipe systems are designed across the state, and so it's just this update uses those same set of standards for city pipes as well. So it's not that certain things apply to ODOT roads that don't apply to city roads. It's just making sure that if it's the 10-year storm, it's the 10-year storm for ODOT, for us, for everything else.
I was just confused what transportation had to do with our pipes.
Right, yeah, well, because these standards apply to new roadway systems as well.
I see.
Yep.
Thank you.
So that is the extent of the application presentation. If you guys have other questions or if you have questions for city staff, we're all here.
Can you just educate me on something that?
Yeah.
Peak flow versus flow duration. I read
Oh, boy.
we're moving from measuring from moving from peak flow to flow duration.
So that's a move that city actually made in the 2015 update to the stormwater standards, but it is a move it's a change that's occurring statewide. And so the difference between peak flow peak flow versus flow duration. Peak flow is, what's the speed of water essentially? So if it's 10 cubic feet per second, that's the largest amount of water that's going to come off of a system. Flow duration says, but for how long? Because I could have a flow of 10 CFS coming out of my pipe for 1 minute, and that might not do anything. But if that same amount of water comes out of my pipe for the next 4 days straight, that's a very different impact on our system. So the move that is been dictated by state DEQ that's being implemented through most of our communities is to move to measuring flow duration, to say it's not a matter of how much water is coming off, it's a matter of how much water for how long.
Okay.
And so that actually, Oregon City and developments in Oregon City have been applying that type of analysis since the 2015 grading standards were adopted. So you guys have been in line with the state standard for the last several years, which is good.
So you said this is a gravity system, the whole stormwater.
Correct.
So for your example, it can be coming out a certain velocity out of the end, but that's not the major factor to consider. It's how long it does that.
Right.
Do you have in your design criteria of doing things that can divert long stretches of rain into holding ponds so it doesn't go into the Willamette at, forever and ever?
Right. Yeah. So the design standards do call for, we call flow control facilities. So that would be ponds. Some communities allow for underground tanks and things. There are a number of underground tanks within Oregon City, not too many. And the other way that you control that flow is through infiltration. If you can soak the water into the soil, that's always better. Geologically, Oregon City happens to not be a very good soil system for draining water into the soil. Got to go across the river, you do a little bit better. So for the most part, that flow control here is through ponds. And I think as you drive around and you see any of these new developments, most of them include some sort of holding pond. We call it a detention pond. And the change in 2015 is to design those in slightly different ways with different control systems on the outlet of those so that you're holding the water back and meeting those durations.
Holding the water in that diversion pond or
Correct.
detention pond for as long as you can before something else comes along. And
Right, and that's the computer modeling that you do, is to figure out how big does it need to be and how long should we hold it. And at some point, the nice thing is if you're draining water to the Willamette, for the Willamette River, we don't require someone to put in a holding pond upstream of the Willamette River because the Willamette River is plenty big to handle whatever water you may send at it, right? So those holding ponds are really for discharges to things like Abernathy, Newell, or any of those small tributaries. That's where we want to have those holding ponds to protect those systems.
That's kind of why I
They're
asked the question
small
about that
dams
whole
on a-
concentration of homes in the McLaughlin and all these neighborhoods, because there's no holding ponds there.
And
It
you
just
wouldn't
goes
want
right
you
there.
wouldn't want one because the Willamette is a much better pond.
Unless it's flooded and high.
Right. That's true.
And that's, again, why I brought that up, because I'm like, how does that work when the river's so high?
Yeah, and actually, that's one of the other kind of major principles for stormwater management is that when you are adjacent to a big river like the Willamette, so when it starts raining hard, where the water is rough initially is in your neighborhoods. The Willamette stays low, right? The Willamette gets high, 3 days later when all the water comes out of the mountains. And so that's why another reason we don't want to have holding ponds adjacent to the Willamette is because when it rains, we want the water to flush out and get out into the river early and not hold it back so that we're trying to release it when the high water comes. So they're two very different timing of when you see the effects of a rainfall in a big river versus your pipe system.
Just for clarification also, you said something, I think the previous slide about the 2015.
Yep.
What were the first ones you talked about, 1997 and 2008?
Sure, yep. There's a lot of different documents here. So the 1998 and then 1988 master plan and 1997 concept plans were relate to the city's master planning efforts. So what projects should we build and when? This update, the stormwater and grading design standards, is how do we regulate new development, redevelopment projects. So they're two different documents.
Okay.
So that are both, that's this. So tonight we're looking for looking for approval to move forward with both the master plan and the stormwater and grading design standards. They're two different
So
kind
the
of parallel
stormwater
documents.
master plan right here is for new development, not necessarily, but I got the feeling tonight you were discussing all of Oregon City.
So the other way, so the master plan is for citywide infrastructure, and then the grading and design standards are for new development, redevelopment projects.
Thanks.
So the stormwater grading and design standards is clarifications and enhancements from 2015?
Correct.
Okay. Is the stormwater master plan new, or is it?
It is new. It will
Okay.
replace the 1988 plan.
Okay, which was
Wholly.
called a drainage plan.
Which is
or
called a
something.
drain. Yeah. Essentially, the city does not have a current master plan for the stormwater infrastructure system.
Okay.
So this is a new plan.
And that new master plan is, going forward, we at least have our knowledge on paper and say, this is what we would really need to do as time moves forward. And we're doing the master plan as not any moving dirt or constructing anything at this time or spending any money towards what it's going to cost to do that master plan, but just get a long-range plan in front of you.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yes.
So he brings up a good question, a good thought. So the dollars you showed us are in today's dollars. So the longer we put this up, the more cost it's going to cost us.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So right now, that was 20 million right now, or billion, I'm not sure which, I can't remember.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
But so as we move, as this is a concept, and you're saying we're not going to put it all into effect now, all those numbers are going to rise over the coming years.
Mm-hmm. And that's why the next step after this will be that funding study. That's not my area of expertise. There's other experts that's what they do, is help you
Does the
figure
city
out
get
how
grants
to
for
fund it.
that from the state or anybody?
There can be, yeah. There's just like with any infrastructure, there's a number of ways to fund it. And
I know
so,
SDCs don't cover hardly anything.
right, yeah. But then there has to be creative solutions, and sometimes there's looking at projects. One of the things we talked about with this plan is, you guys have like a paving program, right? And so making sure that by having a master plan that says, hey, our pipes are deteriorating, we need to pay attention to them, we need to inspect them. Then you can also start looking at, if we're going to come out and do a paving project, what's the condition of the stormwater pipes underneath that roadway? Should we do that work together, right? So we're thinking about the residents and not ripping up roadways multiple times for multiple different utilities, but we can't get that coordinated until you have a plan in place.
Okay.
Yeah.
How far out do you think this plan is projecting to even look at starting in even the minor part?
Right. I mean, I think, so we looked at to figure out what projects are needed, we looked at development and full build out at the end of 2035 is the comp plan number. So we're looking at not just what's needed today, but what's needed all the way through that point. And so that's why we consider this to be, a 10 to 15 to 20 year plan as far as projects. But again, that depends on how soon you can get them funded.
One thing I didn't see on there was the Beaver Creek area. I'm not sure, did I miss that? I was going, with all the
I think that's-
planning we're doing in Beaver Creek, is there any
Right.
concepts for what's going to happen up there with drainage?
Right, so that will come through, that is not specifically identified through the master plan, it'll come through the Beaver Creek concept plan itself.
So it's
they
not
will.
addressed in the stormwater master plan, because it'll be part of the city.
It will be, it's, as far as like where the pipes need to go, that shows up through the concept plan work. Whereas the master plan says in future development areas, we should develop concept plans. Developers should lay out, if you have a new parcel with 30 homes, the city's master plan right now doesn't say where to put the pipes for those 30 new homes. It's the developer's planning that does that.
So with Park Place, South End, and Beaver Creek, all those concept plans, the drainage and the stormwater is going to be included in those, but sooner or later, it's going to end up in this as part of
Right.
the city.
And so all those concept plans will have to comply with the stormwater and grading standards. So that's how everything all merges together, so that again, you're not coming back later and now having to upsize
Exactly.
brand new pipes,
That's
right?
what I was thinking.
Yep.
That's going to be more expensive, but that might fall under,
Yeah.
Christina may explain, under the development of those areas.
Yeah, I mean, there's the reason why there's no plans identified in the stormwater master plan is that they will be built through the stormwater grading design standards when development comes in, and there's no identified like large city facility that's needed. It's not, we're not proposing in Beaver Creek a giant collective city, pond stormwater system where every single subdivision comes in. So Beaver Creek is identified to be implemented as development comes in, and each development will have to meet their stormwater design standards.
So the question is, the figures that you showed us were for the public in the city as it exists now. So do the developers pick up the cost in each of those?
That's one of the
development areas?
requirements of a land use application.
Thanks.
And so that level of detail, that gets done at the development application level. Where exactly and how big each pond is sized is based on your proposal.
Right, okay.
So once you get the master plan pretty much where you think it needs to be for Oregon City, for all the different basins and timeframes, who else gets input on that besides the city? I take it when you're developing the master plan,
Right.
you're working with state and water, Army Corps of Engineers, I don't know who, but who else uses it? Or when you finish that master plan, does that get approved by the state? We'll just say that as our first one and say, yeah, you have an acceptable plan, master plan going forward, and it will give you some amount of life, 10, 15 years, before you know engineers are going to be working on it the day after it's approved to see how it moves forward.
So there's not a state approval for the master plan. The state does provide the city with a stormwater permit that lays out a number of things that you must do. And one of the things that you must do is, in Oregon City's permit, is adopt a master plan. So, but then the state leaves it up to you as a city to come up with, what projects you want to prioritize. And so it's things like, you have municipal code that says you need to protect life and property and all of those things. You need to prevent flooding. So the master plan is helping you meet your own code requirements there. There has been public input to the development of the plan. We didn't include that process slide here, but we did come in front of NRC. We went to a number of community meetings. We had a public open house opportunity for people to come and provide input. The other thing that city staff keep track of is drainage complaints. And so at the very beginning of our work, we had a list of where are the drainage problems. So that's where some of the public input to developing the plan came from. But as far as ultimate approval, it'll be here and through the city commission that will approve the plan and get it going.
Following on that just quickly, does the funding for doing all of this work that's in the city's master plan depend on the city raising that, coming up with that money to do it? Or are there outside funds that if you meet certain levels, you can get grants or whatever?
State of Oregon does not have an extensive program for implementing stormwater infrastructure at the city level as far as assisting with funding. So for the most part, it is, funded at the city level. That's not to say that there wouldn't be potential grant opportunities, or, for example, if there were to be like a state infrastructure fund that suddenly had some money in it, then that would be a potential resource. But at this point, you wouldn't be in a position to apply for any of those types of things because you don't have it in a plan. So that's what we always say, like, get it on paper so that you can go chase whatever money's out there.
I have such an off-the-wall question that
All right.
it's going to
That'll
sound
mean
very
this way.
strange.
This way.
The Grand Ronde Indians having bought that land down there, and they've already put some, not fish ladder, but a fish platform, yeah. And tonight on the news, they were saying that they're calling for the removal of all 3 dams on the Columbia River, the Grand Coulee, the Bonneville, and John Day. And I was thinking, so with all this, could the Grand Ronde Indians come in and say, look at all this you're dumping into the river, not just to the holding ponds, but the old areas, and that's impacting the fish here, just like it is in the Columbia. Has anyone ever discussed this with the Grand Ronde Indians, what our plans are for drainage into the Willamette River? Something to think about. It's off the wall, but they're doing that tonight on the news,
Yeah.
and we want those all stopped.
I mean, at this point, you have a permit from the state that allows you to discharge water. So those permits are actually going through renewal right now, and there's through the preliminary meetings with DEQ, there's no indication that the general terms of those permits is going to change. So if that would be a drastic measure, and I think you would not be the only community impacted, right? Every community in this, well, not every community in the metro area has the same permit to discharge, so I think you're okay for now.
Cool.
That's kind of beyond the scope of this
Well, no, I just wondered.
question that we're gonna, but it's beyond the scope of the project.
It could be beyond, but I just, again, with that happening, it's something to look at in the future, that, and you guys may say that you're fouling up our water. It was just a thought. I said,
Are there any other questions from any of the commissioners? So at this point,
Melissa, do you want to pass me back?
if any of the commissioners feels a need to have the applicant bring additional information back to us in the future?
Comment.
What?
Have you opened it for public testimony as well?
No. Sorry. All right. So we'll open the hearing for public testimony. Anyone wishing to comment? Seeing none? Close the public hearing? Okay, we'll close the public hearing. All right. So if I've got this right, if any of the commissioners want additional information brought back at a future meeting, we can do that. Or you're looking for a motion and a recommendation from the Planning Commission that the City Commission move forward with the Stormwater Master Plan and the Stormwater and Grading Standards.
Correct.
Okay. So does anyone feel a need for additional information at a future meeting?
No.
Nope.
Okay. Anybody got a motion to make?
Make the motion to, is it approve or send on to the City Commission?
Recommend approval.
Recommend approval to the City Commission of the Oregon City Comprehensive Plan, Master Plan, Stormwater Design Guidelines. Is that the gist of it?
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Moved and seconded. Christina, call
All right,
the
just
roll.
1 second. All right. Let's see. Commissioner Stoll?
Aye.
Commissioner Gage?
Aye.
Commissioner Schlegenhofer?
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson?
Aye.
Commissioner Guile?
Aye.
Chair Mitchell?
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right. Thank you.
All right, and we would expect this to go before the City Commission November 6th.
Okay.
So there'll be another public hearing on
November 6th.
November 6th. So folks will have an opportunity to come in and testify there as well,
November 6th before the Planning Commission.
before
No,
the City
city.
Commission.
Excuse me, before the City Commission. Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you. All right. We'll move on. Item 3C, which is planning file LEG 19-00003, Beaver Creek Road Concept Plan, code and zoning amendments, parks, enhanced home occupation, cottage industry, and concept plan renaming. Ms.
You're all night
Robertson
without
Gardner.
Yes, 1 second, just switching off.
Hold on to support much.
All right. Thank you, Chair Mitchell. We are back with 3 new topics this evening for, not new necessarily, but 3 topics this evening for Legislative File 1903, which is the Beaver Creek Road Concept Plan. Each of the meetings we've had the last couple month or two is been taking the Beaver Creek Concept Plan Implementation Project, which is looking at zoning code amendments and rezoning portions of property inside the city limits within the Beaver Creek Road Concept Plan area, and kind of breaking them down per topics. And then at some point, the Planning Commission will have a package of code amendments and findings, and will make a recommendation to the City Commission, who will then do the same thing, hold hearings, get public comment, and come up with a package of recommended code amendments and map amendments, and then adopt an ordinance. So this evening, we are looking at 3 topics. We're revisiting the home occupation conversation we had in September, looking at how parks acquisition is going to happen, and then discussing potentially renaming of the concept plan. So tonight, really looking at direction on those 3 topics and what staff can bring back at a future meeting if needed, if full direction isn't given. So to start off with the Parks Acquisition Code, the proposal for this Beaver Creek Road Concept Plan is kind of our new foray into requiring proportional parks dedication at time of development. So today, if you are going in through a subdivision application, they're really separate. You propose your, site plan design review or subdivision application, and we don't look at parks acquisition to proportional. Our parks staff acquires land through a willing seller, willing buyer, and then through system development fees, they move forward with parks development or redevelopment of existing parks. So what this is doing is saying, because a lot of these properties are already inside the city limits, if you remember, in a previous meeting you understood our conversation of clear and objective standards for development, and we can't require residential development to go through like a master plan where maybe a compromise condition of approval could be negotiated out for parks acquisition. So we're really looking at a proportional, straightforward calculation. The parks really were mapped as kind of 2 main park ideas and then the Powerline Trails corridor. So I'll talk about all 3 of these. You'll see on the map that was created by our consultant team this spring, the South Central Open Space Network is shown in kind of a pink. The geologic hazard overlay to the east, which is the conservation area, which I'll show in a future slide. This has been identified by our Parks and Rec Advisory Committee to also be pursued as a public open space, as well as understand as development comes in, what is the correct width and width of the easement and width of any trails construction. So I'll go through each of those 3. They were in the staff memo, and I'll be available for questions after I kind of go through all 3. To start off with,
Was the dark green the trails?
The gray shows areas of the Powerline corridor, and in there could be trail opportunities.
Yeah, I just saw this big green thread going through there.
Those are streams.
Streets, okay.
Yeah,
thanks.
streams.
Streams, okay.
And then you'll see the natural resource overlay buffer around that. So in order, I feel like as also what Alyssa mentioned, you have to adopt a plan in order to implement a project. And so right now, both the linear park and the conservation area is not in the parks master plan. And so as part of this Beaver Creek Concept Plan amendments package will be 2 exhibits, Exhibit A, B, or C, or Exhibit A, that looks at identifying new park spaces and identifying just enough information that describes kind of the minimum, maximum size and a little bit of detail to provide direction at the time of development. So you want to provide enough direction, but not too much direction, right? You need to get that balance. So when development comes in, you can have both the applicant and development staff being able to figure out what's the best place with our parks department, where's the best place to implement the parks. So I met with the Parks and Rec Advisory Committee in August as well, and they'll be moving forward either in the October meeting or the November meeting to adopt their formal recommendations. So where you see TBD is the Parks Department and Parks and Rec Advisory Committee are still kind of thinking through, but I wanted to provide a level of detail so you understand kind of what would the exhibits will look like. So for example, the linear park element is really identified as a pearl and string approach, understanding that as development happens over time in the Beaver Creek Road concept plan area, especially in the residential area, it may not all come in as one big subdivision. It may become in phases, and so maybe opportunity to acquire pearls and maybe even build pearls at different times that are connected by a string, and that would be a 30-foot pedestrian or bikeway, which really is the east side of the Holly Lane extension. So if this is a Holly Lane extension road, imagine, if you will, instead of a 5-foot planter strip and a 5-foot sidewalk, you kind of have a much larger kind of shared use pedestrian bike path that then has 3 to 4 pearls of a park connected linearly along it. So our Parks Department sees that not as 3 or 4 pocket parks, but one contiguous kind of park entity that may have some different identities and are connected. So as part of the final package, the minimum maximum size of the pearls will be determined. Is it, should they be 3 to 4 acres each? We're looking at maybe 8 to 10 total for the size of the park. And so that may be looking at, how small is too small for each pearl and how big is too big for each pearl. So they'll be coming with some minimum maximum sizes.
And that's something that the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee is going to work on? Because it seems like at a minimum of 8 acres and 3 to 4, they're...
Yeah, and so
you're certainly not going to get 5 acres.
No, but I think we're going to get from them understanding how small is too small and understanding some more detail related to best practices for park maintenance and parks programming and things like that. And so we want to get some of their expertise involved, and then this will come back to the Planning Commission before it gets part of the full package. But I wanted to kind of prep the Planning Commission to understand kind of how this parkland will actually get acquired. So kind of minimum average width and depth. We don't want our pearls to be 5 foot wide, 200 feet long. But so kind of look at what that average should be. Once again, that balance of certainty and flexibility. We want to make sure we aren't acquiring land that's not usable. And then most importantly, we've heard from our Parks Department and a little bit from Parks and Rec Advisory Committee that there really is a goal for active recreation components, was not just all passive open space. So they want to make sure that what is acquired can have those active recreation components. And that could be active recreation as fields, it can be playground space, it could be basketball courts, things that are not benches and kind of open space or natural resource areas, which absolutely could be involved in the pearl and string, but wouldn't be all of it. So that's kind of the element. So when you see that pink area, it's not all of it is park, but along there would be that acquisition of the pearl and string over time.
Is that the only place for parks that you see?
That's for this linear park.
This
is the identified, the linear park. So you see to the left is the Beaver Creek Road concept plan area. And then this is just the translation into our consultant team's map from this spring. So the next area which our Parks and Rec Advisory Committee and our Parks Department really wanted to pursue as a second open space park, and I think we're calling it right now, it's either the East Ridge or the Thimble Creek Conservation Area. And what that is Thimble Creek runs here kind of at the bottom of a hillside, and the top is that 480-foot elevation, which is about right up here. Not all of this area is in the Natural Resource Overlay District protection boundary. Some of it is, Almost all of it is in our geologic hazards overlay. But as part of the Beaver Creek Road concept plan, this is really coming from the text of that concept plan of what are those elements. And a way to think of it is at least, and this is once again the minimum for acquisition, if our Parks and Rec department was able to do a willing seller, willing buyer for more of it, that's great. But this is looking at the minimum required acquisition as per the adopted plan. That somewhere along, I'm going to use the older version, somewhere along this area, there's 2 viewpoints. Size are to be determined, so it could just be on the east side of the road. There's 2 kind of pull-out viewpoint areas where that makes sense topographically. Half of the area, this is coming straight from the plan, half of the area between the Thimble Creek, I'm going to use this one, between the Thimble Creek stream buffer and the 490, so if we drew a box right here, half of that area would be public open space. As part of that, there's a 700-foot non-interrupted view corridor along this kind of East Ridge Road, somewhere in there. And there's a forested trail that kind of connects one side to the other, kind of going into the hillside. This would be a natural trail, not a paved trail. And once again, that both staff and the Parks and Rec Advisory Board recommend that this be acquired as part of a development application.
Could this end up being one of the largest parks we have in Oregon City? By the size of it from what you're talking?
That's a good question.
Our own little forest park?
I would say it's probably like Waterboard Park size-ish, probably close.
Well, what I was thinking is I know that the Parks and Recs have had problems approving any parks because of the cost to.
Yeah, well,
keep them up.
this would be first acquired as open space, and then implementation would be
Parks and
done.
Recs would be responsible for any lawn mowing or any cleanup.
This would be a City of Oregon City open space.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's the elements of the conservation area. It's going to be very hard to build in the geologic hazard area anyway, so we think the acquisition of this should be pretty reasonable. There may be some, couple of homes in that non-open space area, and that's once again at the development application level to really determine the size. There is in the draft code, there is a calculation based on dwelling units and size. And so if you have the land identified of the park on your property, you are required to dedicate that per your proportional development. If you are not, if you have a development where a park space is not identified, you do have to pay some fee in lieu, and that money is going to help with acquisition. So let's say I am an apartment complex. I'm going to go back here.
You're speaking about acquisition. We're going to have to buy this land from who?
No, the idea is that you're proportionally dedicating as part of your development application.
The initial are the ones
Correct.
who own it right now.
As
But
part of
it may be that the development where this park is located is not have enough impact to justify taking that big of a park. In which case, we're going to take some of the money that we've gotten from fee in lieu from developers who don't have park land.
Okay.
And we're going to pay that property owner that is subject to a bigger park dedication than their impacts require.
I see.
So that was a perfect segue. What an example would be, let's say I'm an apartment complex right here or here. And I don't have a park on my property, but through the calculation that is in the draft code, I do have some fee in lieu. So that money gets put in the pot to help with the acquisition. So maybe I'm a subdivision here, and I have a development application and the number of dwelling units. I run that same calculation, and I don't get all of that land, but I dedicate some of the land. And so then that's that combination of acquisition through proportional dedication and using fee and lieu to work with the owner on acquiring the rest of the property.
That's standard practice to do that.
Yeah, that's the way you do it outside of pre-negotiating through like a master plan or an annexation agreement or development agreement. So that being said, the city can negotiate if with a willing developer through a development agreement. That always is an opportunity. An applicant can always go through the master plan and, have that negotiation. But this is a way, once again, that clear and objective standard. We have to provide a path. And so if we have to provide a path for clear and objective standards, we have to provide a path for park acquisition that's clear and objective and proportional.
The problem I have with fee in lieu, and it's whether it's parks or whatever, it's always a poor second choice.
Yeah.
If I'm removing trees and the code says I have to provide I either have to mitigate on site or do fee in lieu. Fee in lieu doesn't do anything to help that neighborhood, right? If the trees, if the money is used in planted trees across town. So what concerns me is that because from the public's viewpoint, fee in lieu is a horrible second choice. So how can we say, we want this land, and you get what I'm saying?
Oh, I know. Yeah.
I know takings. I happen to be in the middle of the Dolan versus City of Tigard case, and I know that it's proportional taking and all of that. But what bothers me is so we don't end up with our pearls and our strings because they did fee in lieu instead.
Well, if
we didn't
the
get the
pearl and
parts we
string is
wanted.
on your property, you cannot do fee in lieu. It's only when you have a proposal where there's no park identified on your property.
I guess I didn't read that.
Yeah,
clearly,
so an
then. I'm
example
sorry.
would be,
I
so a great
apologize.
example is, if I'm an apartment complex right here at the intersection of, actually that would be Glen Oak, so this would be one of our neighborhood commercial areas. So I'm a new neighborhood commercial building, I still have a calculation for money. If I'm doing a subdivision right here, there is a calculation for the number of dwelling units equates to how much land you have. So that's why the pearl and string we feel is one of the best approaches, because we can't guarantee how a subdivision will be phased and how big each subdivision will be. But we do know in the residential area, that's where most of all the pearl and strings are. So we can get them over time proportionally.
Okay, so if I own land that is needed, I have to allow that. And
Proportionally.
the funding, proportionally, and the funding comes from fee in lieu from somebody else in the development that doesn't have any land we want.
If it's above proportion. So it's this combination of, we
Right.
can get what's proportionally required based on the number of dwelling units. So 150 unit subdivision, do the math, let's just say 2 acres comes out. Okay, you are legally responsible for dedicating that 2 acres. It's not all the pearl and string, but it's proportional, maybe it's 1 acre, whatever it is. And then
Above that, you would be
above
compensated
that, we
for.
are at legal liability to require things above and beyond
And I
our
think
proportionality.
the corollary to what your concern is, in addition to requiring the dedication where development has mapped a park, but we're also going to make it clear that the fee in lieu has to be used for these parks. We're not going to use it for another park on another side of town.
Okay.
That's the difference. The tree fund goes to trees citywide. It doesn't go, it's not neighborhood specific.
And so the underlying code that's written for this will say that fee in lieu has to be spent.
On
In this
these parks.
Okay.
I mean, I think I don't think it'll be specific to a pearl or a string or but it will
To
be
the
these
concept.
parks in these.
Okay.
Yeah.
Help me get this around in my mind, though. So a developer, we're all talking about affordable housing for the last 2 years. And so a developer has to give up some of his land for that. So he's going to say, I'm going to charge more for that property or the house that I'm selling. So there goes no affordable housing, because he's going to pass the fees on to those apartments or those businesses or to those houses, correct? So it ends up not being affordable housing in that area.
Well, and that's why we're trying
Sorry.
that's why we're trying really hard to make sure that we are not appropriating more that is proportional to an application and the impact they have on our park system.
Well, and I think that the theory is that every resident deserves parks.
Oh, I agree.
regardless.
We hardly have any in Park Place, but I agree. But I just keep thinking we're talking about affordable housing for over a year now, and I keep thinking these kind of fees get charged to whoever's the houses, the homes, and all that other stuff, and then all of a sudden we don't have that affordable housing we were looking for.
Yeah, we want to be mindful to the concept plan that was adopted, and this is really doing that and implementing that vision back from 2006, 7, 8, and beyond. The other thing I would say is that the code that we recently adopted allows a variety of housing types, and that still is the case in this area. So you can still see a mix of housing types in all of our zoning designations throughout the city. So hopefully that helps a little bit, but yeah, I mean, this is just the zoning toolbox. There's certainly economic development toolboxes to look at affordability.
But even the lower ends will have a higher cost. That's what I'm saying. It's not going to impact me, but I know people down the road, even the lower end are going to be a little higher end for those people.
I mean, the truth is there's no infrastructure here, so the whole thing is going to be expensive.
Yeah.
Commissioner Johnson?
Carry on to Carrie's question or answer. I thought it was a good answer around in fee in lieu. Did you basically say, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but did you basically say this fee in lieu would be spent someplace within the Beaver Creek concept plan,
She said that.
not in
Crosstown.
the rest of the city?
SDCs can be.
And that's all encompassing instead of putting it down in detail to say, well, we can do it here, where it's used in.
For an example, maybe the size of the conservation area is that proportionally this subdivision application, it's only 3 acres, but I'm once again making up numbers, but this whole section is 8 acres. Well, some of that fee in lieu of can be that further acquisition, to get to that level. Yeah.
So to clarify here, fees in lieu stay in that area, but
To acquire.
SDCs can be
So
moved anywhere in the city.
2 pieces, yeah. This is a parks acquisition
Yeah.
code to acquire land. It is not a code to require the development of parks. That still happens the city way, which is master plan, and the park is identified, and then SDCs are identified, maybe through phases, and a parks plan would be designed. We go out to the community. So what that pearl and string looks like is a future planning process. This is really just saying we want to make sure we acquire land so we don't just keep approving development applications and we run out of land. It's really just saving that land aside so the city can move forward. Now, that's being said, there's always the opportunity for development agreements. If maybe there's STC credits and a developer wants to build some of an acquired park, that's always an opportunity, and that would be a future negotiation that's kind of outside a kind of a development application. That would be could happen where a developer said, well, okay, my park system development fees I pay for all my 100 homes, can I use those and build out, a basic open space, basic pearl? And that would be a negotiation between the Parks Department and the City Commission about, using system development fees and buildings. That would be a separate discussion. This is just code that ensures that we have land to have that future discussion.
Christina, help me with the terminology. I can't recall it right now. So when a certain area wants to improve something like roads or maybe the parks, they can do their own tax for that area or something.
Well, there's local improvement.
District, that's the word I was looking for. Can the people in this area do local improvement districts to add in to get those parks or things like that?
That's always the opportunity. I mean, I really do hope is once we get these parks added to the Parks Master Plan, then the city can look at their priority list of when they want to design and construct these parks. And that really is a larger city conversation.
Who determines whether they're going to have a local improvement district? Is that the citizens in that area or the city?
The local improvement district is just that. It needs to be approved by the residents who live
in
there.
that particular area.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, usually LADs are more identified usually for transportation improvements. I haven't seen it in parks, so it's just a tool. local improvement district. Any questions before I move on to talk about trails?
Sorry, I
Yeah,
do have
sure.
a park space question. Sorry, so in the documentation you sent us that we all read, there's a formula for amount of park space, and it basically is 8 acres per 1,000 residents. Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee added this Thimble Creek Conservation Area. Does that need to change that park calculation? Because I think if you ask most residents of Oregon City, I want a park, they want flat land and a swing set and, not a conservation area. I mean, that's
Cliffs.
that's important, but I don't think it's what residents in an area like this would be looking for. So if PRAC has added this additional space, do we need to change that formula to ensure that we're also going to have the more traditional family use kind of park?
Potentially. So we can look at, this is really next direction. If Planning Commission agrees with Parks and Rec Advisory Committee recommendation, we can look back at our calculation and see if it needs to be amended, but you always have to check back and make sure that we're still within kind of legal proportionality.
Right.
And then if we are getting close, what are some other ways to maybe amend the code to ensure that we have adequate land for the pearl and string. One thing being said, there will be potential, there is definitely going to be fee in lieu for money that could be used for acquisition of the conservation area. Not a lot of the conservation area can be built, so I think we'll have to kind of think back on making sure that the code can address worst case scenarios, which is all the money goes to the conservation area. All the acquisition land. So it could be that, it's this many acres, but a minimum of 8 is for active recreation space in a linear park.
Okay. Thank you.
So the trail corridor, there are Bonneville Power Administration large corridor, and the Trails Master Plan does not have a level of detail. So if an applicant came in today and they had the BPA power line and they were proposing an industrial development, there is not a recommendation of the width of the easement or the width of the actual trail path. The BPA easements can be as wide as 300 feet, so the idea is somewhere within that larger easement is this trail corridor. And it's a 30-foot trail width corridor with a 10-foot wide path is the recommendation coming out of really, which is looking at the existing Trails Master Plan and trying to find the corollary trail. This is not a giant region-wide trail, it's more of a neighborhood trail, community trail, and so this is what the Parks and Rec Advisory Committee and the Parks Department felt was the best corollary to that. It's going to be a lot of Tetrising when we get to these industrial projects. But once again, if we don't have it adopted, we can't acquire it. So that is kind of my overview of where we are in the parks acquisition. It's not quite finished yet, but I wanted to give everybody an update of our approach. At some point, we will have the recommended details coming out of the Parks Advisory Committee on what they recommend for some of those details related especially to the pearl and string, sizes of the pearl, and how best to make sure we have an adequate sized park with also enough flexibility that we can work things in as development comes in. And then I can come back, when that comes back, I can have a kind of update related to what's the most amount of park space that can be required proportionally and make sure that that is balanced between the pearl and string and the easement area.
Great.
That's a good question. I may have been asleep here for a while, I don't know. But we'll find out after I ask my question.
Sure.
The trails, string and pearl, all of that are being allocated to residential construction.
Not necessarily.
No? Okay,
The
that's
trail
not-
corridor is in a lot of the industrially zoned CI property. So everything you see here in gray, so this is Loader Road. So everything north of Loader is CI.
Yeah, my question really was around the industrial side. Do they pick up any responsibility
Oh, they
for
do have a
trails
calculation
or
for fee in
parks
lieu.
or?
Yep, so there is a smaller calculation for fee in lieu for everybody in the, now, people who work there will use parks less, but they will use
Right,
some parks,
right.
correct?
They use those to walk a lot, like
Yeah.
on Nike for their lunch hours.
So everyone's in.
Okay.
One thing I like to keep reminding everybody for this code implementation project is we're setting the table through zoning and code amendments. Questions related to infrastructure phasing, cost, development review, all these level details come afterwards. Things about who's going to pay for what and how, these questions of, does the city have a role in subsidizing or promoting or getting grants? Those are policy questions kind of after the table is set. And we can't really have those policy discussions until we're all working on a common set of development criteria.
So this will go on for 4 years.
This is what zoning can do to implement the Beaver Creek Road Concept Plan project. So the second topic of this evening is continuation of the conversation of expanded home occupation or cottage industry. Those are kind of interswap terms. And what you have in front of you, I do have an update to the Beaver Creek Road Concept Plan Stakeholders Survey that we sent out a couple weeks ago, and attached to the agenda was the survey as of last Monday, and this is the survey as of today. So just to read,
How many people replied? It's quick.
I think we have probably 25 people
that's it?
total.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, it's not this is not a statistically significant survey. I call it a pulse of the people who have been involved to date. It's a great way to talk about it. But just to give an overview of what was discussed at the last meeting, as part of the Beaver Creek Road Concept Plan readoption in 2016, the City Commission kind of directed staff and the Planning Commission to look at if these kind of home occupation or cottage industries should be implemented as part of the concept plan. It is not required. The concept plan is approved and meets the criteria without changing our home occupation license requirements for home occupation. But this is an opportunity potentially to provide additional options for people just within the concept plan boundary areas. So at the last meeting, there was an initial discussion, and I heard some general direction from the Planning Commission that they were interested in learning about more ways to think about how to add additional opportunities for employment in residential districts. And so out of that conversation kind of came 6 different categories of ways to think about how one could enhance or amend the home occupation license. That is how the survey went out. And so the 6 items on the screen are ways that the home occupation license could be added to. So, for example, today we don't allow retail in citywide home occupation. So, for example, if you are doing a service like you're a massage therapist or you cut hair, you can't also sell goods to your clients. Outdoor storage is not allowed. So if you are a landscaper, maybe, and you bring your equipment home, it has to be inside a building. You can't store business equipment or business use outside of your structure. Today, you can't park commercial vehicles, so large commercial landscape trucks or your fifth-wheel cab at your property. You can't perform any work outdoors. So if you did indoor yoga, you could not do outdoor yoga today in our home occupation license, or like you couldn't weld or, make your widget outside. Today, we don't allow off-site employees to work at the resident. You can't even come and check in. Like, let's say you're a business that might send employees out for the day. Your employees can't come to your house to check in, to get like their orders or pick up something. And nobody that doesn't live in the house can work in the house. And then we also have a requirement that no more than 50% of the resident can be used for the business. So that's today's home occupation kind of requirements. So really that conversation was if the Beaver Creek Road Concept Plan was looking at at potentially providing more opportunities for employment in this area, maybe there's some lenses that could be looked at to potentially allow expanded home occupation options. That being said, these are within existing R5 subdivisions, so you probably either have 5,000 square foot lots, or maybe some duplexes, or maybe some cluster housing, and then R2, which is our multifamily, which could be row houses or apartment complexes, kind of your traditional multifamily. So that's the milieu of the two different kind of, do we want to look at maybe things are allowed more in multifamily and not in single family, or vice versa, or do we see both as the same? So I'd like to open it up for a little bit of conversation. I know we have people here who want to make public comment after we're done with the presentation, but kind of some general conversation about what kind of direction the Planning Commission has. If I'm hearing clear direction from any of these kind of 6 options, I can come back with a proposed red line code. I think what we heard from a lot of people is, you heard some people that were interested. I think that actually is a pretty good pulse of how my conversations have been going. What you have in your survey results is some people absolutely positively do not want this to be allowed. And some people are interested, but they are concerned about nuisance and how do we properly regulate it. So if there is a nuisance, it can be addressed in kind of a clear and objective manner, because just because your neighbor is bugging you doesn't mean we as a city can bring code enforcement out and tell your neighbor to stop. We don't have good nuisance code or good criteria of what you are not meeting. So my goal tonight is kind of a conversation with the Planning Commission, kind of use these 6 topics as a way to provide additional direction. If I'm hearing from the Planning Commission, let me know if you want me to come back with potential red line recommendations for any of those 6 topics. And then I can have some further conversations with our code enforcement staff and kind of legal team about this kind of nuisance questions about if we do allow this in more of our residential zones, how best to address the worries about your potential neighbor who may or may not like what you're doing, and what kind of recourse do they have, or do you have to protect yourself?
Well, I see the nuisance comments here. A lot of this traffic's mentioned all the way through here.
Sure.
Several.
Clarification
Yeah.
question. So I have a brother-in-law that's an electrician. If he were to be his own electrician in Oregon City with his own electrician truck for his business, he can't park that at his house.
If he has a commercial truck, he cannot.
But how do you mean commercial truck?
I think it's, once again, I can get back, but I believe it is, it's a registration if you're above a certain weight.
Above 10,000 pounds or 26,000 or?
It's a weight limit.
It's a weight
I can't
limit.
recall what it is off the top of my head, but it's the weight of an empty box truck.
Okay.
And also signage on the side of a truck. I hear that in our neighborhood. You can't have a sign on it.
That's more of an HOA rule. I think this is, it's a classification. A commercial truck is a
Sure,
classification.
yeah, it's probably.
I think that's probably something that we might need to have a little more clarification.
Yeah, so if you have your Ford F-250, you can
I've
park
got-
that in your parking space.
Sure.
Say that again?
If like you just have your Ford F-250, truck, like a residential truck that happens to have a business decal on it, that's not a commercial vehicle.
Okay. You said we had public comment?
Well, at some point this evening, we will have public comment.
I'm not done with my question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
What I'm getting at, if I have my own business that has this commercial vehicle, I'll use tow truck because it's easy, because it's probably big enough, right?
Yeah.
I can't park that at my house.
Today with Oregon City's home occupation license
But
code.
if I'm employed by a tow truck company and they give me a take-home truck because they're going to call me out at 2 a.m, am I allowed to park it at my house?
Yes.
That makes no
What?
sense. I mean,
No.
As part of you cannot get a home occupation license if your business is using a commercial vehicle on your property.
okay.
I think it's consistently, I think is the,
Yeah,
Wow. Really?
seems
Yeah, I'm confused by that one. Very
strange.
I think the key is I don't know how the city would regulate it outside of our home occupation license.
Yeah.
So somebody could bring 2
Complaint driven,
Yeah.
like any other code enforcement.
Don't belong to them.
Okay,
There
so,
were 3 employees of the tow truck company.
Because we have one person in our neighborhood that has 3 trucks there, and he's only one person living there, but he parks them all there.
I know code enforcement will come out for limousines parked in front of houses if a limousine driver brings it home. Because I know a guy that had to move it.
There's provisions for how long you can park in the public right of way.
I think it's,
Parked in his driveway. Neighbors complained and he had to move it because it was a business vehicle in the public line of view.
Yeah, I'm guessing it hit the weight limit because it was so big, perhaps.
It could be. It was very long.
But
Maybe we need some more information on
Yeah.
that one, so we know
Yeah,
what we're
I
talking
can
about.
provide more information.
My suggestion would be that we talk about these one at a time.
Right.
Guys, sorry, you have something to add?
As I just said, try driving a hearse in a driveway. That's a commercial, but it's not.
Why don't we tackle these and get our comments one at a time instead of hopping over? That might help Christina get a little more.
yeah, and I don't know if it's
clarification on what
worth
we're
it to
thinking.
do public comment before you have a conversation. I know we probably,
fine
did
with
you
that.
want to speak, Elizabeth?
I'd be happy to hear what they have to
Okay.
say and try to adjust.
Okay.
Okay,
What's
we'll
needed.
we'll do that at the end. Okay, all right, so let's talk about retail. Picking up goods for sale. So customers, so you could have a little showroom of your fragrances or whatever, and people could arrive, come and go.
It could be as part of a service, or you could have your own retail showroom of your widget that you are selling.
Your widgets, okay, that's good.
So are you saying that's allowed? Because I see 15 people say they do not.
Well, no, we're not, nothing is allowed.
Oh, okay.
It's not allowed today. The point of this is because this concept area is supposed to be employment friendly.
Right.
Do we want to expand what we do allow in this area? Today, you couldn't have a retail store.
So like a Sensi, somebody who sells eBay.
Yeah,
Tupperware.
or your shop. You could take a bedroom in your home and take goods that you now have in your shop on Main Street and say that you're selling them from home, and people could drive up, come in, and shop.
Buy them. Yeah. But yeah, I understand.
If we expand the definition, so what I'm asking for is input from the group. Is that something that we think would be compatible in either the home, the R5 area or the R2 multifamily area in this concept area?
My thoughts all along had been, that would probably be the easiest one for me to support.
Okay.
You know, it's, I did support it on my own little survey and says, yeah, home pickup, you know, that's, you get, if you're concerned about traffic as a home pickup occupation, you get the mailman delivering mail, you get UPS delivering mail, you get all of those type of people. They pick up and deliver, so it's a two-way type street. It's really not much different than what we already have in the city. We have a mailbox, and UPS and everybody else can drive up to your house and drop a package and pick up a package. It seems a pretty easy fit for me.
Other comments?
I guess you need a definite.
Yeah, I like what we discussed at the last meeting was retail sales incidental to the service being provided on site. So the hair care products.
Hair care,
when you
if
cut
you
hair.
cut it, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, what I'm seeing with this is, and we talked about it last time, that there's really no discretion. If one person's allowed to sell a candle, another person's allowed to sell a hammer, another person's allowed to sell a garden shed, you know, we can't pick and choose what's allowed and what's not. So will some people take advantage of that and, you know, make things difficult for their neighbors? We always pick something simple like fragrances and, you know, body care products, but someone's going to be selling something else and their neighbors won't like it. There's nothing we can do about it because we can't make decisions like that. We can't
you could always
discriminate.
put limitations to say, like, you can't sell food, so maybe it's not the same as a coffee shop or something, or a grocery store.
Can we say how big an item?
You can have how big your retail spot size is. You could have a retail
Square footage
limitation.
Can you say hours? Like not after 5 or 6, 7 o'clock at night, they don't want traffic coming in to a neighborhood? Can you
Yes.
do hours?
Yeah.
Yeah, you
Time,
could
place,
do no
manner.
nights or weekends for that matter.
Can we say no forklift?
This came up
the
under
forklift
Mayor Norris. several years ago because they forgot about the fact that some people sell eBay and things like that, and people come to pick up or they ship out.
Right.
And so that's a home occupation, but it doesn't interrupt anybody else, really. So, yeah, and you've got a good idea there. If it could be limited or in some way, like
Yeah, somebody
hours
needs a
or...
retaining wall stones loaded in the back of their truck with a forklift
Yeah.
at 4 in the morning.
I don't know how you do that, but I agree with him down there that retail picking up goods is all right, but within limitations.
Right. I don't think we're making a decision here to say what they can
No,
do.
no.
Right.
It's just the concept.
Whether it's be
That
allowed.
we, if
So
Christina
I like to use widget because a
captures
widget
that,
can be a candle and it can
Yeah.
also be,
Right.
I don't know.
she
something really big.
defines those later.
But I think my goal is if I can get enough policy direction and questions about policy direction, I can come back with red line recommendations.
I agree with number one.
I like the idea of incidental to the service.
Yeah.
And if I sell 1 or 2 widgets a day to 1 or 2 people, I'm not having a big impact.
No.
But if I'm a great widget seller and I sell 100 widgets a day to 100 different people, now I'm a nuisance in the neighborhood. So
And that
that's
is
where the
hard
devil's going to
because-
be in the details on this,
Yeah,
is how do you restrict it?
That's a great example because people want to know, how come you don't have parking spaces for that really, really good restaurant that everyone wants to go to? Well, at the time of development, I don't know if you have a really good restaurant, and so, you have to look at this in a way that it really is a widget, in a sense of, we don't know how, so you can do time, place, manner, but you can't say you only get 5 customers a day. I mean, that's getting a little bit hard to,
I think it's important to not
do.
set an upper limit on somebody's success.
So
Yeah.
to agree to this and say
I
what
agree.
looks acceptable to us, is that opening up a can of worms for you to have to figure out?
No, you're giving me policy directions to help write red lines. And so really what this night is it's really hearing from you what you see as kind of as a policy, what things could be implemented. And then it's my job to kind of, hear your conversation, pick out kind of things you were concerned about, have, discussions with our code enforcement department, with our legal team, with other staff, to try to see what would be the best way to implement that through red line code. And then at some point we'll come back and then we can kind of still keep going through the.
And this
So we have, am I hearing agreement for retail with restrictions?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Time, place, manner.
okay, all right.
Yeah.
Let's move on. Outdoor storage associated with a business. Thoughts?
No.
I don't support that.
Yeah, it's ugly in a
It's
hurry.
in a-
Landscape equipment, fifth wheels
And the
parked next
smell?
door.
Yeah.
It's in a smaller zone, R2
And R5.
and R5s.
No.
It just brings in a lot of potential for used car lots in your backyard. And, I don't want to go that direction.
Yep.
So that one's a no?
Correct.
No, yeah.
No.
The answer is no.
Yes, nodding head of a no. Yeah, got it. Okay, parking commercial vehicles. Do we want to hold off on that one until we know more about what's allowed now? Because I'm
Why
not
don't you-
sure we
I
understand
can provide more
exactly.
detail, but it'd be good to hear your conversation about that.
Okay,
I think no.
Greg, does yours get covered, your example, under the offsite employees working in the residence, does that?
No, what I'm getting at is, if I'm employed by somebody who gives me a take-home vehicle, I'm a tradesman of whatever sort. It's okay for me to park my electrician's van that says ABC Electric on the side. But if I start my own electric business, it's not okay to park it. That's detrimental to the entrepreneurial spirit that we should be encouraging. If that's the case.
If you're
What do you
using
think
the
of that?
home as the office, but if you start your own business and you have an office, then it wouldn't.
Right, but if
That's
I'm going to start my own one-person electrical business, I don't need to.
No, you can rent a room from your house. A lot of people do that. They'll set up an office in their room and then they'll write it off.
But then it's a home-based business and
It
then I'm
is.
not allowed to park.
So does yours come into this?
which doesn't seem at all
Which
consistent.
doesn't seem consistent if I'm an employee of someone else who gives me a commercial.
Right.
So I do have this is probably like a size question of,
Sure.
does the planning commission see a difference between maybe a Ford F-450, like a bigger, like just like that pop size up, or maybe the large, more commercial van? and a dump truck or a fifth wheel, or is like something much, is there like a clear, like,
So I
things
can
that's
give
more
you-
than an average
I can give you
truck?
those exact definitions. So an F-450 is probably like a 12 or 15,000 DPW vehicle. A dump truck is going to be above 26,000. So what it requires is CDL, basically. An F-350 is probably going to be 10,000, which at that point that's probably where the line is. Right? I don't know the code, but that's probably where the line is, right?
So you're saying that there's this middle category above 10,000 but below 26,000 that may be more appropriate?
Your tow trucks, your like basically most of the smaller two-axle vehicles are going to be below
Like
that
a
26,000.
tradesman van?
Yeah, that'll be.
Yeah, but not a
But
box
they could
truck.
be, well, but it could be a tradesman, it could be a 10-foot box truck for an electrician or a plumber.
One of our neighbors is a PGE guy, and he takes the PGE, but like you're saying, it's not his business.
Right.
He brings the PGE truck home because he gets called out at all hours of the day.
Sure,
We're
but
not
that's going to be
complain
above the
about
10, what I'm assuming is the limit right now, 10,000.
Yeah, so two clarifications. One is that you can have it at your house, it just has to be in a building. So we often see this through code enforcement, that people will build an accessory building if they have the space to do so. Our definition of home occupation says that you cannot have a commercial vehicle on site. Our definition of commercial vehicle means a vehicle over 8,000 pounds gross weight that is designed for or being used to transport merchandise, or a vehicle of less than 8,000 pounds gross weight. So,
Or less than,
yeah,
which means any van,
which means
any scooter
any commercial vehicle.
is under 8,000.
It really means anything designed for or being used to transport merchandise.
So it's about transport, not body service.
Yeah, sorry about that. I don't,
You can't sit
it's
on
not
the
a clear
curb.
definition since it,
Yeah.
clearly.
And the weight definition, I guess, wouldn't be a
not even
major
part of it.
concern to me. If it's a vehicle, whether it's a van or a F-350, it takes up a certain amount of space.
Right.
But
Yeah.
if you're going to put a fifth wheel trailer or whatever you're going to do with that, that takes up
Yeah.
3 times the space of the vehicle. And if it's a truck, it takes up more space. And we're in R2 and R5 zone. I don't know where you're going to find a place to put all that stuff. Is it going to be on-street parking is where it goes? Or do you
Yeah.
need to have off-street parking to accommodate all of that? And
Yeah,
I didn't see that clarification here,
I
so.
think what Laura's saying is, in this situation with these smaller lots, it probably is going to be quite hard to build a building that your larger commercial vehicle can be stored inside, which means if larger than these commercial buildings are allowed, they probably are going to need to be allowed like in the driveway.
So these are a lot of R2s, R3.5, correct?
This is a proposal. If they,
I'm just saying in the area. 'Cause I'm
yeah,
thinking-
the R2 and R5 would be the 2 residential zones in the Beaver Creek
And we're
district.
discussing whether these can be in those areas.
Correct. Yeah.
Like some people also have fifth wheel trailers, and a lot of people in our neighborhood, but you have to have a fence to put it behind. It can't be out front. Right
Right.
now, we're discussing commercial, but people do like
Yeah,
trailers,
and
but
I-
probably not in a 2 or 3.5.
So a good example with Commissioner Guile is one of the questions that came off at the end of the survey was, even if, all of these were adopted, can homeowners associations and developers not allow them as part of their covenants? And I kind of saw a clear direction that people were supportive of kind of if a development doesn't want to allow it not to. And so that's that combination of what the city is requiring and allowing and what a development may want to allow. And so if a development does not want to allow these kind of enhanced options, they don't have to.
And one of our more popular code enforcement as it relates to this has to do with the front of a semi. So semi trucks when no trailers are on it, because oftentimes people will purchase that personally and then go do some runs. And so we frequently, well, not frequently, that's probably the most code enforcement is that we see. And it's not actually all that big, so it could fit on a smaller lot on their driveway.
I would imagine the driveways aren't going to be very big on these.
Yeah.
And those are allowed or not allowed?
Not allowed according to this definition. But
Are they
if
allowed
you
in
would
the
like
driveway?
to, that could be something that could be allowed in the zoning designation if you want to allow commercial vehicles that are smaller, or it could fit in a smaller
So
space.
We have a neighbor that brings them
Where,
home.
where are we
Or
at?
to the
We've
corner with it.
discussed it. Are we ready to say, let's have
Well,
Christina
I'm still confused.
research it? Oh, yeah, we're
because
all.
I'm not sure I understand exactly where the code is today. I mean, I know you read it, but
Yeah.
But do we want to take it off the table, or do we leave it on the table?
Yeah, what I'm here, well, let me just,
For now.
the one sentence description of our existing code enforcement for home occupation. If you have a commercial vehicle, you have to put it inside a building. So oftentimes these are larger lots that build kind of larger accessory buildings for their larger truck. So in this situation, they probably couldn't do that because these are going to be much smaller lots. So would the Beaver Creek Road Concept Plan expanded area want to allow these vehicles basically on the property, so not in the right of way, on the property, which most likely would be probably the driveway? And then what's the size, what's the limit? Like how big is too big? And I can do a little bit of research on kind of this middle category or size, you know, how big is the, or how much does it weigh, or are they easy to categorize, when do you bump up and something's just a dump truck, maybe too big? Is dump truck too big for this area? I guess I'm kind of trying to find the on this end, and then somebody's transit van with their sticker on the side is probably just fine. And then there's the stuff in the middle. And what could be allowed and how do you categorize that? And I can do some more research.
okay.
Again,
So you feel like you can bring something back?
Yeah, I can bring something back.
Again, Greg, is the tow truck, the one you were talking about, is that a 450 or 350 size? The one you're,
The tow trucks?
yeah,
No, it's probably a 450. Or a 550 probably.
okay.
Those aren't that
I think I have clear direction on
Okay.
that.
Okay,
Mars.
next.
Okay, work performed outdoors.
I just want to say that welding and outdoor yoga is a
I
really
know.
widespread thing.
And that is what I tried to do.
And you can
It can
do
be
it
a lot of
till
things.
midnight.
Right.
And watch that flash go through
Sure.
the 4th of July in your backyard every night.
I wanted to make
But you
sure
said-
people knew it was many things.
Maybe I misunderstood, but you said indoor yoga would be okay.
Yeah, because it's a service.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like you're doing a dance, massage, meditation.
Thoughts?
It's a service that you can do today.
Do the neighbors get to vote on it? I mean, it's,
If you're in an HOA, they would put the rules on it.
maybe just put hours on it, and if it smells too bad, the neighbors have a right to make a nuisance.
Oh, well,
The welding, not
welding
the
or
yoga,
outdoor.
not the yoga.
So
That's another one. I just have a problem with it because where do you draw the line?
and that's kind of my worry is it's really hard to enforce nuisances if we don't have clear metrics for the nuisance, because it really is two neighbors fighting and they asking the city to come in, and we can't look like we're being arbitrary.
Yeah, then you get up here with a sound meter, a decibel meter trying to,
Can be a thing, but I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's we have to be very clear about how we are regulating nuisances.
You live next door to some guy that wants this tractor trailer rig, and he'll just take the tractor and sit there. But people with diesels like to start them up early in the morning and let them run for 30 minutes before they, and
Right.
you're belching all that smoke right in through your bedroom. Yeah, I just don't see that.
Bad enough in the garage.
any other thoughts on work performed outdoors?
So is the feeling here no?
I think it'd be easier to say.
No,
I'm sensing no
Okay.
on that one.
I'm fine with that.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Off-site employees working at the residence, 1 to 3 employees, or I guess 1 to whatever number we might think, checking in at the residence or working at the house.
No problem here.
Yeah, I don't see a problem with that. The only problem would be parking or transportation, but that's
Right.
I agree with that.
business to work out.
Or they ride the
I don't-
bus here.
I don't have a problem with that, with this one.
Sounds like a home daycare or something.
Right, yeah. I'm okay.
And today, home daycare actually does allow that. It's a very specific piece because of the requirements for per children and when there's breaks. So that's the only time in the city where we do allow off-site employees.
Does 3 seem like the right number? upper limit?
Yeah.
Yes.
I think so.
Would it be
Yeah.
daytime hours? Would we regulate the hours? Would we allow them at night when people are trying
We
to,
certainly could.
because when people come home at night, they expect a place to park. And if people are, I don't know if there's gonna be a lot of night jobs there, but people come home, they can't park because it's full of cars, they might get frustrated.
Do we want to see an hours limitation?
I might suggest that you might want an hours limitation because it will have the effect of limiting particular types of businesses.
Good point.
Yeah.
And then I know from a lot of people, it's, what we get for the code enforcement is very early morning employee check-ins.
Right.
Like the 5:30 a.m. And so having a bunch of people show up to get the orders for the day, that's where we see that nuisance.
Okay.
It's not when you've gone, people assume during the day there's always a mix of people in your neighborhood.
Okay, so it sounds like we have a consensus.
Not
Yes
too
on the-
early, not
Yes on
too
this
late.
one, 1 to 3, not too early, not too late, maybe not on weekends.
Sounds good.
Okay,
Whatever the current noise hours are, I think they're
yeah,
7 to something like that.
Yeah.
okay.
Okay.
Using a majority of a residence for business, more than 50% of the space devoted to the business use.
I'm
If you
iffy
saw my
about
house
that.
during Halloween, you'd say 70%.
That's on record.
Call code enforcement.
I want it out of there.
Thoughts on that one? Commissioner Stoll?
I have to think about it for a minute or two.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm kind of wishy-washy. I would, if it was my personal, you got to have some living space and some working space. But I could go either way on that one.
Greg, what did you say? I didn't hear it.
Oh, I said I needed another minute. I would be inclined to let a person decide how much of their house they want to dedicate to living and how much they want to dedicate to business. And honestly, a lot of the space could be flexed back and forth day to day or week to week. And
What if they don't? What if they don't have any residential?
Well, they have to live there, right? That's part of the deal.
Who would determine how much percentage? I mean, would they have, the city have to go in and
No idea.
As part of the home occupation license today, because we had that 50%, you actually fill out a worksheet, you identify that you aren't using more than 50%. So you fill that out. And so that's, part of it is you fill out identifying what you are doing or not doing. And then as code enforcement comes in and we get a complaint, we can go back to what they said they were doing. If they're doing something different, then we can balance that.
I guess I think of this as somebody preparing taxes, somebody, not necessarily realty, but taxes and other stuff, and where you come and do it. And I keep thinking if somebody's using it for their business mainly, and it's more than 50%, then it's not really a home, it's more of a business. I don't know what you guys
That's what
think.
I'm thinking.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is the more of you're making a widget. I mean, as the technology changes, the widgets change of what you can make inside.
What's the city say right now?
It's 50%.
Is it 50?
So this is this conversation, is there a time in this area, do we see this different where, you would have a larger because you're providing more flexibility, but is this a situation where you can't really think of a use that would ever be that way? And so why would you change a code section that's not really being needed? Why change something that's not being requested? So maybe if there's a case to be made, I mean, that's one thing. So that's one way to look at it. I mean, the other one is more like, do we just stay out and know that you have to have a minimum residential and flip it the other way? Like you have to have a minimum number of percentage that's residential.
What I was thinking about is I've seen on the west side of Portland when I lived out in the Multnomah area, or somebody, a business, taxes again as a reference, bought a building and they had 1 to 3 employees and they had each of them in each of the rooms. And that's all the building was there for, the home. They just did taxes out of it and nothing else really. And somebody just happened to live upstairs, but used it all day for just a business contracting or whatever they did. That's what I was thinking about.
Yeah, and that actually absolutely could be a thing. And, if for a good example, if we didn't put a limit on retail, then you didn't have a 50% cap, then you could have a very large retail, or I think this is more of making the thing that you are maybe someone's picking up, or maybe you're sending off through, Amazon, through UPS or through eBay or this, where you actually are assembling product or making product. And is there a point where you might be case to be made that in this area you may need more than 50% of your house? Or
Or if it's a seasonal You know, if you're making Christmas decorations, your house is going to be full the first week of December, right? But then it's going to be empty in January. So.
Yeah.
Is this ever enforced? Does anybody ever actually go look at
You know,
what people are doing?
sometimes it has been, in the sense where, we've had one where like someone really wanted to, I'm trying to think, it was a long time ago, but yeah, but it's not very common. Most people, it is a secondary, or it's an ancillary use to their residence. So really, we're asking this kind of a larger flipping question, which I think Carrie asked, which is there a place to think of Beaver Creek where it's not clearly ancillary, it's kind of almost on par with the primary use? And is that something that's meets the goals and policies of the concept plan and could be found compatible, or could we find a way to deal with nuisance, or is that pushing this concept a little bit too far for comfort?
Okay, another question. Does the house need to retain any kind of livability?
Well, right now we're looking at this under expand home occupation. So we're assuming there's somebody occupying part of the
Take out the
residence.
kitchen and...
No, I think we're assuming it's still a dwelling unit. The question is, what's the ratio of the dwelling part to the business part?
For someone with a big house, they can spare 1,000 square feet, and someone with a 300 square foot house, they can't spare anything.
And these are going to be small houses.
They're going to be really small.
Smaller, yeah.
So I think 50% is probably the max. And then hope to stick to it, and then they'll use every room anyway.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, does code enforcement come up and say, I need to enter your home?
No, I think this is more of with, when someone, it's.
Right, but somebody makes a complaint and they come in and say, hey, your neighbor said you're using.
Hell, I used to fall asleep on my job.
I recall the complaint that we're referencing, and the complaint was that nobody lived there.
Okay.
And so it's very difficult to prove. So the city we ask nicely to work with property owners to address code enforcement situations. And when they don't want to, at some point, we need evidence to take them to court. And if we don't have, it's hard to get evidence that someone doesn't live there. I mean.
Okay, well, I think 50% sounds, just call it 50% and hope for the best.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to see a whole house used, not be used, and I've been trying to think of a better number than 50%. I can't think of one, so 50% is fine.
Yeah.
I have
No change on that one then, is what we're recommending.
They're going to use what they're going to use.
I want it to be a drug
Okay,
house.
any other comments from any of the commissioners on any of these topics?
No,
So just to recap, I'm going to come back with some red lines for retail,
they use the whole house.
commercial vehicles, and off-site employees.
Yeah, better define the commercial vehicle.
And just confirmation from the Planning Commission that they don't want to disallow HOAs and developers from not allowing these uses. So kind of like in equitable housing, we said, you can't say no to ADUs or duplexes. We could say you can't say no to these expanded uses. Or we could be silent and let development and HOAs choose what they want to allow for home occupations, which is how it is citywide today.
As long as we're not violating any state laws, I think we should allow HOAs to make their own decisions.
It's interesting that most HOAs we have found, because I was serving on our board, use a boilerplate form. And so there's so many things that weren't addressed. They said no flags, no banners, so that meant no beavers, no Oregon, no nothing. They were trying to eliminate political signs, but you could do that. So I'm hoping that when an HOA comes along for an area like this, that they understand all the concerns that we have gone through and address those in their forms, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, they would have,
boilerplate.
well, we do look to make sure that they aren't contradicting city code, but we don't offer, grammatical red lines. But I think the key is they would have to specifically identify those uses.
Commissioner Johnson.
One comment on the overall line item by line item. What's the risk reward to the city of doing this? If we make this a little lesser requirements here, do the complaints go up to the city that they have to respond to? Does the neighborhood livability go down? And do we we save any, the concept is good that live, work, you save that transportation element, roadways and time. But is this going to be a popular enough options that will get enough takers that it's worth our effort? And I'm not lobbying one way or another here. I'm just saying, are we opening up a can of worms? Or is this a piece of cake for everybody?
Can I add on to that by saying, do you know if this has been tested in any other areas, or are we creating a whole new kind of a concept that could be followed by other cities and states?
I've looked around. I mean, this is a different way of thinking about it. Different cities have different regulations about what they allow for home occupation. I think one thing is this could be a test case in the long run if the city wants to amend its citywide regulation. So one way to think about it is this is testing kind of potential future citywide changes, but using the concept plan area. Or maybe there's not a lot of appetite, and so this is a unique, expanded option, and it is a unique part of the city.
So in the line of projects coming up, if this got built before Park Place or South End, could that same thing be put in those, or is the concept plan already stationary for those two?
Well, you probably make citywide changes rather than, because both Park Place and South End don't really talk about this specifically, but, this could be a test case, and then, after a couple of years, there could be a conversation is anything that we've learned from this that we want to, apply citywide, but, it could be many years in the future. It's really the direction of the city commission. What we're really looking at is any changes proposed here just happen within the concept plan boundaries.
Do you see this one going prior to the other concept plans because there's so much effort put on it?
The market's the market. I mean, once again, this is just making zoning amendments and setting the table.
The industrial is going to be really big for Oregon.
We're setting the table, cost of infrastructure, the market, who wants to sell their property. Those are all factors that are outside the zoning code.
Okay, thanks.
And it is a recommendation, it could be a recommendation from the Planning Commission to the City Commission to go forward. So, I don't want to necessarily use that as an excuse to say, well, let's give it a little test and see what the City Commission does with it.
Yeah.
So,
I think it's
to build on, should we do a little test?
Well, I think this could be the test case. I haven't really seen much appetite citywide for this, but, this, like a lot, the projects like this, look at things in a new light and, make questions. And a couple of years from now, there may be a good test case that this was a great idea or this was not a very good idea,
And the residents' response, was pretty overwhelmingly, I don't support this.
It was only 27.
Yeah, this is not a statistically significant survey. It is a pulse of the people who've been involved to date in the concept plan area.
Christina, what we've been discussing.
Okay.
Can I ask Christina a question?
Can I understand?
Mike, can I ask Christina a
Sure.
question? Christina, with what you've seen, things that we've gone over tonight, we're not making a lot of changes. I'm going off that I've seen off the last statement. Don't make a lot of rules changes. Leave them as they are. We don't want to be like Portland. We're not really changing our rules. We're adjusting a little bit, but we're not really changing major rules in the city, are we? Did you hear me?
We're making revisions to the business license that this Planning Commission thinks would be a benefit. And so this question of impacts and nuisance is this larger legislative conversation.
Right. Okay.
Because it's already home occupation.
The way people work is changing.
Yes.
And our code doesn't allow for that. So to me, this is allowing newer kinds of work that people are wanting to do in a test area.
Yeah. I just saw that last statement at that.
Yeah. I don't think we haven't reinvented the wheel here
No.
on anything.
That's what I was asking.
Okay. And we do have public comment. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Gracer Lindsay, and I had comments on what you were discussing. I'm grateful that you're thinking about this issue in great detail. I'm really glad about that. And I had some comments to supplement what you were talking about. Oregon City is a bedroom city for the region, and most residents commute out of Oregon City to get to outside jobs because the city's job to housing ratio is very low, which is why this industrial land was brought into the urban growth boundary. So with all this commuting of Oregon City residents and then also people who live further out come through here, all going to jobs not in Oregon City, it causes a lot of traffic congestion. The current code is very limiting, so we end up with people who are potentially entrepreneurs not being able to start their business in Oregon City if they don't happen to have enough money to rent a property. So I think a lot of people get started at their home because that's what they can afford to do until their business takes off. So what we end up having, since I'm from Beaver Creek and am very impacted by Oregon City, I spend a lot of time here, I noticed from going to the Hamlet meetings there over the decades that the people who have jobs that are actually urban businesses, because your code is limiting, they end up out in our area because the conditional use requirements are more lenient out there. So they don't have an automatic approval. They have to go through a process on a regular basis. But people who would have jobs in Oregon City end up out there. And the jobs aren't related to the rural area. I mean, some jobs are, but a very large number of them are jobs that would naturally be in an urban area. And they drive in here to work. So really it adds to a lot of the road congestion. One of the other problems with this restrictiveness of the code, which I know you're thinking of modifying, is that other governments end up financially benefiting from these jobs rather than the business tax coming to Oregon City and helping you be able to provide services. The taxes go to other government entities. So you're losing a lot. You're losing all the creativity, the growth of the businesses, the future of that business, and all that tax base. A lot of is being lost by your not having those people be here. So it seems like you should have a neighborhood, at least a neighborhood, where industrious people can start a business from their home. I wanted to comment on, since I listened to your discussion instead of just going with my notes, I was wanting to talk about some of the issues that you were talking about. So on my notes, I'd written down like you might have a would-be up-and-coming landscaper, and that person would need outdoor storage. You didn't seem too interested in that. But one of the ways that in my community I noticed a problem of large vehicles and the neighbors not liking to see them, that fencing is often used to make the business more neighbor-friendly. And I heard a bit about the R5 and R2 sizes, and I'm sorry I don't know the city lot sizes, but it occurs to me that in this area it'd be advantageous if you had some larger lot sizes to allow more flexibility in these businesses. It depends on what your main priority is. The land was originally brought in to be industrial. So if you wanted to actually promote industry and business tax and reducing commuting and, you know, get the city to have a better jobs to housing ratio, you might actually think of lot sizes that would promote a range of types of business and not just go with these small lot sizes that won't work. And I'm trying to see what else I have here. You would not want to end up having businesses that serve this area being excluded from being inside of Oregon City, which is currently happening, that people who serve here. Like, you know, just right on my road, there's somebody who does have a forklift company. I don't know if he leases them or if he just repairs them, but he has forklifts come and go to his property. I can see the area. It's not actually that big. It's not much bigger than someone's backyard, but he can't do it here. But he's not, those forklifts are not used out in the rural area. They're used in town. And he's just a single family forklift company. Instead of thinking only of the point of view of current neighborhoods where anything unusual is seen more as a nuisance, you could possibly think of this area that you're planning as an attraction, that you have people who have an inspiration in their mind. They want to grow their business. They want to be their own boss. They want to hire people. They want to do something good for the city. That if people knew that this area had this special factor, they could be attracted to it. And if that was known, then people who just want a quiet neighborhood and they don't want business, they would know that's not the place for me to buy my house. I should buy my house over here in a more ordinary neighborhood. This is the special industry neighborhood, you know, and maybe it could be organized. I don't know if that's a bit too much to ask, but if I was doing it, I'd try to organize it so that different types of businesses would be in different parts of the neighborhood. It seems to me that you could develop this in a stronger fashion if you, instead of the survey, only one person on there actually was one of the affected parties, where they were trying to start a business, they did it from their home, they could see this being a good place to live. It seems like you need to find more people like that to interview to see what would serve their needs. Like, I was really grateful to hear what Greg was saying. I mentioned at the previous meeting that my brother-in-law tried to start a welding company in his Oregon City home, which he's passed on, but it wasn't part of the code. Fortunately, his neighbors were fine with it, but it'd be nice if you had a place like that. And I was thinking of other types of jobs, like my next door neighbor does have a dump truck business. He doesn't haul that stuff out in the rural area. He does it completely in town. At the time he started the business, this is just my impression as being his neighbor, he couldn't afford to have a different property. It's just his family business, but he did have several dump trucks. And since then, he's been able to get a different property where they are at. But for that beginning businessman, it can make or break it on having all these additional expenses. Someone I know in my area is a food caterer. You know, you can imagine a person like that might have an employee or something like that, or have a vehicle. If somebody's going to do car repairs, they want to get a business started like that. I have a neighbor who used to be a professor of automotive and has a shop. And you might have someone in town who's good at that and might want to get a little business started. Or someone in construction or gutter repair, plumber, just all kinds of things that you would like to open the door to these folks. And I was noticing that on the survey, it was different what you had online than what was passed out tonight. But the majority of the people are actually not Oregon City residents. And I was noticing among the comments that they're quite concerned about traffic. So I don't think they're really imagining what is being promoted here and how it could benefit the city. It's more like they're afraid that they're going to get in a traffic jam, and that's about all that was on some of the people's minds. But if those people realize that development is being planned here and that this could actually reduce the traffic by having people not have to commute, they might have a different perspective. But I think they really have a fear perspective right now that the roads aren't going to handle what's being planned. I had one other little comment, but it's not about this, so, but okay. It's about the name change.
Yeah, that's fine.
I noticed that the staff seemed to narrow down, most of the names had different problems with them. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, they were recommending Thimble Creek concept plan. And I was thinking that the comment that the staff made that it was a more unique name, that it wasn't shared by lots of different things. And also the fact that thimbleberries are really common and loved in our area made it an attractive name. I don't know if something better will come up, but it did sound pretty good to me.
Thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate you being here.
Yeah, there's
Okay.
one more slide we didn't
Okay.
do, but that's the last slide.
Names.
So there was, I think, really from the beginning of this process, there was, from residents of the hamlet of Beaver Creek, but not just hamlet of Beaver Creek residents, but just in general, people not understanding where the Beaver Creek Road concept plan is, what side of the road it is, and so it's just a name. So all through the spring and the summer, we've kind of had this conversation of, is there a different name that would be more geographically specific and would not be confusing? In the staff memo, there was some look at some other names. I had a conversation with Karen Moore, who's kind of a lay historian in the area, and nothing really came out from her research. So right now, Thimble Creek seems to be the one that keeps bubbling up. So staff right now is generally recommending, if the Planning Commission and City Commission want to move forward with renaming, it seems the best option. But if there's a better one, we're always looking for, any other one that may also work.
Dirk and I attended those first few meetings. I'm not sure. I don't think anybody else did out there at the Oregon City High School. Thimble Creek seemed to be a very popular name because it was unique, as you said.
It's
They don't want to be known as another Caulfield like the east side, the west side.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It
Thimble
seems
Creek,
to be the one that no one has a problem with, which sometimes is just, you're excluding all the ones that people don't like.
That makes sense. We still don't understand why it's called Park Place, but there's no park there.
So the enacting code, I think really we're looking for any direction, and then I will work with, our internal staff and legal team on what we legally need to adopt for red lines that formally renames it.
The only tiny issue I have with Thimble Creek is probably one person in 100 is going to know where Thimble Creek is. But maybe that's good, because then they'll go look and find out. Oh, okay, it's there.
I never heard of it.
Loader Road is another one that popped up, but I'd like Thimble Creek too. So we got nodding of heads.
Yep.
And it does eliminate the confusion. Beaver Creek Road is really long,
road,
and who knows where that might
It's
be.
just a tiny little creek.
To follow on what you said there, very many people not knowing where it's at. You go the other way, the golf course or the airport or something like that kind of does. The golf course could cause confusion because there's a golf course over on 213 also. So, but the airport, and I know there's some small airports around the city that I don't know what the name history. I read that about Karen's thing. Was there it was an air park or something like that?
That's the name of the airfield.
It was an airport.
There is an airfield today.
There's another Park Place that's now been developed.
It's a placeholder really, because if this thing, we go through with it and it starts building, everybody's going to find out, and they can start with one. Thimble Creek is as good as.
So we're recommending Thimble Creek?
Yeah, I'm for it.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Okay.
All right, so probably not till the big package, but between now and the big package, there'll be some red lines identified that
Does the City
legally.
Commission get to weigh in on this too, what they like?
Well, it'll be part of the package. So they through the hearings process, they can agree or disagree. I have yet to hear anybody who doesn't like Thimble Creek, and I have yet to hear somebody who's provided a better recommendation. So.
Don't listen to Rocky. It'll be Ghost Creek.
Okay.
Oh, and so next steps. We have November 12th City Commission work session, topic transportation. November 18th, I'm going to come back. I spelled home occupation quickly, and do you see that Y there? Apologies when you type into a computer with a small font. So we are not going to be doing Beaver Creek on October 28th meeting. You'll have a break of me on October 28th. So we're coming back on November 18th with those proposed red lines for the home occupation. And then on November 25th, we'll dive into the transportation questions and issues. So kind of in November will be the last of the topics. And then into December and maybe early January will be the package of all the red lines moving forward and the findings. So it will kind of move from individual topics in November to the whole package until you're ready in December onward, ready to forward the whole package to the City Commission.
Okay. Great. All right. Next item, 3D, Development Code Amendments. General amendments for clarification, correcting of error, or improvements. Who's up on this one?
Hold on a second. Where's that? Oh, here we go. There's too many.
All right, thank you very much. Sorry, I was getting the clicker. So with the code amendments we recently did, most of them were related to equitable housing, but we changed a lot of code. We knew that we would have to come back later and refine some of the edges, correct any problems that we created. So you guys have taken a look at 2 rounds of code so far in September, yeah. And so we're about to go to City Commission with this whole complete package. And so obviously at the last minute, we identified a couple of extra things, but it's pretty small, so I'm just going to go through them real quick. And then again, we'll be at City Commission Wednesday, but we're not asking for first reading until December, so we'll have all of November to kind of flush through all of these code amendments with them as well.
Effective August 2nd, but they still haven't approved it?
The bulk of the amendments became effective August 2nd. Then we had a wait time to see what problems would bubble up, and then we did this round 2. So this is the final part of round 2. I promise I will not add any more code on you. This is it. So there's just a couple of major topics. One is adding a requirement that 3 and 4 plexes have to do some street improvements. They're limited to 10% of the construction cost, which is coincidentally the same thing that we do for single-family homes. So we had sort of a hole in our code where single-family home duplex has to do some street improvements like sidewalks or street trees, and then 3 and 4 plexes didn't have to do any, and then other uses like commercial and stuff would have to do them as well. So with this, we think we right-sized it by doing some limited street improvements, and because it's limited to 10% of the construction costs, we can avoid any concerns with proportionality as well. We added some clarifications. So one thing in this round you saw us do is just say, please see this chapter for whatever thing. And so we added cross-references for the street improvements in both the street improvements chapter and then also in the 3 and 4 plex chapter. We also added a cross-reference for attached single family. So when you're looking at the standards for 3 and 4 plexes, it says you got to do street improvements in compliance with, the street improvements chapter.
When you talk about street improvements, you're talking about sidewalks as well as the strip and the street.
Correct.
Okay.
And the other thing that we did is when we were talking about 3 and 4 plexes, we were so heavily focused on 3 and 4 plexes in residential zones that we were not as mindful about what the impacts are of 3 and 4 plexes in commercial zoning designations. And so we have in this round some code amendments that the parking cannot go in front of the building in a commercial zoning designation, because a parking can go in front of the building in residential, just like your driveway's in front of your house. And so we wanted to make sure that we had continuity, because we have a lot of properties on 7th or Molalla that are smaller, modest-sized lots that maybe could be a 3 or 4 plex. So we want to make sure we had some consistent urban design along those streetways.
So when you say next to or behind, are we talking putting in, what's the word I want? Alleyways, thank you.
It could just be a driveway to shimmy up, behind the house
so they'd
or
have
something.
To put those behind. Okay, thanks.
For cluster housing, we had some clarification about some open space requirements. It was unclear if certain open space requirements applied mathematically across the whole property or to each pod. And so we clarified some of those standards. We also added a separation requirement. There is currently in the code, you can have groups of 5 parking stalls and that's it. But we don't say how far they have to be separated from another group of 5 parking stalls. And so we wanted to be very clear, so we added a separation requirement of 9 by 19 for the other stalls.
Is this added just to the cluster housing section or to?
Yes.
Okay.
So 5 cars.
Does that same separation distance, is that already in our, like on the commercial code?
In the commercial code, we say you can have up to 8 parking stalls and then you need a little island.
Right.
And so this is like about the size of an island.
Okay, but the commercial code doesn't say what size that island has to be either.
No, it doesn't. But we allow big parking lots. So what we had was we had a pre-app come in with like, our intent for cottage homes was to have small groups of parking spread
Okay.
throughout. What we had in the pre-app was just a normal looking parking lot like out there. They just had a little landscape island in between it, but it was actually just one big parking lot. And so it wasn't matching our intent, and so we wanted to clarify it.
Okay, thank you.
The typical width of a car for the other parking, and you're just adding one in between?
A stall width out there is probably about 9 feet. Mhm.
Okay.
Yep, 9 by 20. There's some variations in there depending on if it's
And this
compact
will
or
allow
not.
for most of the people in those cluster homes to have a space to park, or are we taking away spacing by doing that?
No, we're not touching our requirements for how much parking they need to have. We're leaving that the same. And the other thing is we needed to change an and to an or in our fence requirements. Somehow our language says that fences needed to be next to and behind a building, which is kind of hard to do. So it's an or. So really minor tweak. And then for marijuana businesses, this one is a newer one. We realized that we've been working with the state building codes division. We required that a licensed mechanical engineer sign off on an air filtration system to verify that it's works appropriately and the smell wouldn't be too much. And that conflicts with state building code, and we are not allowed to conflict with state building code. So we're taking off the provision that the ventilation system has to be designed by a licensed mechanical engineer.
You know, that's more of a raspberry than a marijuana leaf. They're 5 leaves.
I don't know, it's in the file. And then the other standard we're doing is we have requirements for outdoor lighting, and we're not proposing changing the standards themselves, but they don't actually apply to institutional. So we added institutional to the list. So things like parking lots and off-site site lighting, we know that we don't want to, even for institutional uses, we don't want to make it too bright for neighbors or things like that.
Is cluster homes considered institutional?
No.
Will there be lights out in the parking lots that you're talking about there?
Those will have separate standards for lighting. I'll have to take a look to answer your question, but institutional would just be city government or the college is institutional.
There's a lot of parking out there, okay. Sorry.
Okay, so institutional does include schools?
Uh-huh.
What about a football field or a baseball field? You're not going to be able
yes.
to fly.
Well,
There's some things in our outdoor code, outdoor lighting code, that you couldn't light a baseball field with our commercial lighting, with our outdoor lighting code.
yeah, they may need to get variances for some of those specialty cases. And maybe that's not a bad thing, because then you can come to a public hearing to figure out exactly how you mitigate that,
Yeah, okay.
timing or something like that. So I'm okay with it not fitting perfectly for all. That's all I have. But thank you for allowing me to quickly walk this on at the last minute. Do you guys have any questions or comments or concerns about any of these amendments?
No, I don't.
Okay.
No? Anything? Anything?
Nope.
Makes sense.
Okay. We're on to approval of the minutes then. Are we,
You can do them as a group?
we can do them as a group. Okay, that was giving my question. So are there any additions, corrections to any of those 3 sets of minutes?
No.
Anybody want to vote on them separately, or can we do it all together?
I move to approve all 3.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Christina?
All right. 1 second. Who seconded? Sorry.
Me? Or no,
You made the motion.
All right.
Seconded.
Commissioner Gage.
Aye.
Commissioner Stoll.
Aye.
Commissioner Schleigenhofer.
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson.
Aye.
Commissioner Guile.
Yep,
Chair Mitchell.
Aye.
Passed.
All right. Communications.
All right, so October 28th is going to be our next meeting. We will see you here at 6 p.m. to do our interviews. Our interviews, though our hearing, we noticed for 7 o'clock, our interviews may eat into that timeline a little bit. We will send you an email with all of the applications that were submitted with the confidential information redacted, but we will have the interviews here before our hearing on the 28th. I also wanted to give you an update on our upcoming hearing schedules. In November, our November 11th meeting is canceled, and we are scheduling the replacement for that on November 18th. So we'll have a meeting on November 18th, and we will also have a meeting on November 25th. So you get the first half of the month off, and then part of the last half of the month, we do have items that are scheduled and have been noticed. If you are unable to attend any of these meetings, especially as we go into the holidays, please let us know, and then we want to make sure that we have a quorum for all of the meeting dates. Also, if City Hall is closed for winter or something like that, just know, we'll send you an email, but just know that the Planning Commission hearings are probably closed as well. For December, my apologies in the email I sent, we have a meeting on December 9th. And it looks like we will try and cancel our meeting on December 23rd. We don't have anything scheduled, and I'm trying to waive off anything from being scheduled that date. So you can have the night off.
Can I ask for a clarification?
Yeah.
We've done it so many different ways. One time we all interviewed the candidates for commissioner, and we all voted. And the mayor sat in, but the mayor chose somebody opposite of what we did. Then the last time when all you were chosen, the mayor did it without interviewing, asking us. So how's it this time? Is the mayor going to sit in with everybody and make his decision, even if the board here or the commissioners vote otherwise?
Are we doing anything?
Yeah,
that's
that's
what
a
my
good
question
question. So we're doing the same process that we did 2 times ago, and we're using actually a lot of the same materials. So each person has a
Standard
vote
questions.
sheet. Each planning commission will have a vote sheet, and you rank your people, and then we will collect all of those and then hand them to the mayor to
And we
look
did
at.
that.
The mayor is
and the mayor
invited.
chose opposite of us that time.
I mean, it is
His choice, but why did we even bother is what the commission at the time said. Why bother when he chose what he wanted?
So in this, we
Sorry,
have
Mayor.
not that much time to make these decisions. So we kind of have a hearing scheduled for 7. We have a lot of interviews to get through. We have 8 people so far scheduled. So it's going to be sort of a quick turnaround. So you guys will do your votes and turn them in. There probably won't be any discussion as a group. And that's just because we don't have a lot of time since the hearing's still there.
So to vote for someone, we give them a 1 to 10 number?
No, you're going to
1 to
rank
8?
them all in order, 1 to 8.
So our favorite pick is the lowest number?
You will go through it next time in more detail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that open to the public or is that not?
It is open to
It
the
is open.
public. We encourage other applicants to wait outside, but everything is open to the public, so
And is this just for the one position? That,
Yes.
it is for the one
and
position.
isn't that over in December?
Yes.
Yeah, but we would reappoint. It would have canceled, so we're actually, it's a little funny because you're limited by 4-year terms. And because we had 3 seats come available, we're trying to get people to stay on a certain schedule. So it'll probably be a 4-year term and ending just shy of December 31st in 4 years.
Oh, okay.
So because they can renew.
Okay.
If you find someone to replace me, have at it.
Yeah, no, there was nobody's terms expiring this year. We have 2 positions expiring December 31st of next year.
Okay. I'm released from
One
jail.
more year, Tom.
All right.
Years.
Any other announcements?
No, thank you very much.
Anything else from anyone else? We're adjourned.